All right, Aaron, feel free to take us away.
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Shaw. I'm the Director of Natural Resources Programs with Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District and Chair of the 4 Counties CWMA Steering Committee. And I will be leading us through this event today. And I want to thank everyone for coming in. This is our 14th annual 4 County CWMA pull together, and hopefully this is the final virtual version of this, and we can be back together in person next year. But that said, we've got a great event planned for you today. And, the 4 County CWMA has been, throughout my career going on 15 years, a great organization for bridging connections with one another, with partners, a collaborative environment for dealing with some of the challenges we deal with invasive species management on a regional scale. So happy to be a part of this organization, happy to serve it, and happy to see you all here at this event today. We've got a great event plan. It's a bit shorter than what we would typically do on an in-person schedule, but that's hopefully to avoid a fatiguing Zoom experience, which I think we probably all have a thick skin for now, but don't want to keep you in front of a screen longer than we need to. So on the agenda today, we've got Alex Gorman with the Oregon State University Extension and Mariah Davis with USDA APHIS, and they'll be speaking about emerald ash borer in Oregon. Patterson Clark will speak about harvesting invasive plants for art. Weston Miller with OSU Extension will showcase the new Solve Pest Problems website and resources that are available. Michelle Delpine from West Walton Mass WCD, and Mitch Bixby from Portland Bureau of Environmental Services. Jack Halsey from Oswego Lake Watershed Council will highlight several projects their organizations have been working on. We'll also have some committee updates from the 4 counties steering committee and go through the CWMA data standardization template. And we will, as usual, have John Wagner from East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District present his live comics towards the end of the event. For those of you seeking credits today, we will have 2 pop quizzes during the day to take attendance. And for those quizzes, you'll need to enter your name, your license number, and a code word that will be provided during today's talks. So we'll have more on that here in a minute. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew for some housekeeping on the day, and then we will kick things off. Andrew?
Thanks, Aaron. So good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Felton. I am the co-chair of the Education and Outreach Committee for the CWMA. I also work for the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District. So I just want to go over a few housekeeping items for everyone before we dive into the content. So I have just shared the agenda for the event. So if you do need to reference it, please feel free to look back into the chat. You'll see it as a PDF as well as a link to the agenda itself, a PDF version of it. We also are recording today's presentations and the event, and we'll be sending out an email to everyone who has signed up with a link to that recording. So if you do feel like you need to go back and reference anything, just know that you will have a recording of it that you can hop back into as you need. Everyone is currently muted and everyone's webcams are disabled just to avoid disruption. I have opened up the chat. So, one of the things with Pull Together is that we can all come together as a community. So please feel free to speak amongst each other. I will be monitoring it. So if it does end up getting a little disruptive, I might have to mute it, but I'm hopefully not going to have to do that as well. If you are experiencing any audio issues throughout today, Zoom has sent you some instructions that you can phone into the event. So please reference those along the way. You'll also see 2 icons at the very bottom of the screen. We'll be using the chat feature to talk amongst ourselves, as well as if you have any technical issues. So if you run into anything, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to assist as I can. Now, as Aaron mentioned, for those who are looking for pesticide applicator credits, ODA and the Washington State Department of Agriculture has authorized us to give 2 recertification credits for everyone who attends the entire day today. We are going to be taking attendance via a pop quiz. So you'll need to completely fill out that pop quiz. So to fill that out, you'll need your name, your license number, and then we'll be also giving out a code word during today's presentation, just so folks are able to, we can double check to make sure everyone's listening. So kind of keep an ear out for that code word. We will make it as apparent as possible for you to hear what that is. But you might just want to type in your name and license number into a text box or a Word document so that you can easily add those in. If you are hoping to apply for credits for both organizations, please just enter both license into that quiz. There will be enough space for you to do that. Unfortunately, we cannot provide credits unless you fully complete those quizzes. I'm going to say that again. So please make sure to enter all 3 of those items if you are hoping to get credit along the way. The other icon that you'll see at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A icon. We'll have a chance to ask our presenters questions at the end of each one of their presentations. Please make sure to just use that Q&A box for your questions. If you add a question into the chat, it will get lost. I will be taking a look at that chat, and I can kind of provide a reminder to enter it into that Q&A box along the way. So we will be asking those questions at the very end of each of the presentations. Either myself or the gregarious McSpitchby will be reading those aloud for our presenters. But feel free to enter your question at any time during their presentation, and we can just read them as they come in. Now, and finally, at the end of today, you will be prompted to complete a short survey as you're logging out of Zoom. If you wouldn't mind taking just a few minutes to fill that out, it is a huge help for us in planning this event. And we're able to better highlight some of the interests that everyone has out in our community so that we can bring in new and interesting speakers for next year's Pull Together and beyond. All right, Aaron, I'm going to pass it on back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'll kick things off here. We have an update from the Western Invasives Network Coordinator, and I'd like to welcome back Courtney Gattuso, who is recently started her role as the WIN Coordinator with Cascade Pacific Resource Conservation and Development. She earned a bachelor's degree in environmental science and geography from San Francisco State University. In much of her career, she has worked in natural resource management with various public entities to pursue her passion for conservation. She formerly served as the Fort County CWMA and Columbia Gorge CWMA Coordinator, where she provided opportunities for collaborative management, prevention, and awareness of invasive species. We are excited to welcome her back today. Courtney?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. And can you all see my screen okay? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So many of you remember me in my previous role as the Fort County coordinator, shared with the Columbia Gorge CWMA. So as Aaron mentioned, I recently switched positions. I'm now serving as the new Western Invasives Network Coordinator. So as bittersweet as it was to move on, I'm very excited to stay connected to the CWMAs, but on a more regional level. So I officially started just over a month ago. I have lots of people to meet and I'm learning a lot, but I just wanted to take this moment to formally introduce myself in my new role and just share some brief updates on the Western Invasives Network. So for those of you who don't know what WIN is, it's a regional partnership network of individuals, agencies, and organizations devoted to addressing invasive weed issues in Western Oregon and Southwestern Washington. The WIN program is housed and fiscally sponsored by Cascade Pacific Resource Conservation and Development, who's a nonprofit organization based in Corvallis. They provide fiscal sponsorship and nonprofit management services to programs and various groups. So the mission of WIN is to prevent the introduction and to control the spread of invasive plants by coordinating information and activities with our regional CWMAs and land managers. And we do that through a variety of different activities. We host educational opportunities, secure grants and funding sources for partner projects, do a lot of public outreach, information sharing, engagement with invasive species councils and other working groups, and so on. So we have a steering committee with representatives from city, state, federal, private, and nonprofit organizations. And as you all know, collaboration is a vital component to weed management And my role as the WIN coordinator is really to bridge the gap of capacity issues to help you all work together to accomplish your mutual goals. So this is a list of our current CWMAs within the network. I need to update this map. It is not showing Klamath County or Jackson and Josephine counties, but those are our newest additions to the network. We're really excited to have them on. I've been engaging with a lot of the CWMA coordinators. I have lots of meetings planned to help identify the needs and the goals of each one and how best I could support them. So I'm super grateful to have the experience I had as the CWMA coordinator, as I can take everything that I learned and apply it to the other CWMAs throughout the state. And many thanks to Vern Holm, Troy Abercrombie, and the other former WIN coordinators for their help establishing and supporting these CWMAs. And I plan to keep the momentum going the best I possibly can, and I hope to form some new CWMAs along the way. So one long-standing activity of WIN is to help solicit funding for the support of IMAP invasives and the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline. IMAP invasives, you all know it, but it's an important part of state and international networks that share and utilize invasive species data. Within Oregon, IMAP shares data with ODA's Weed Mapper, incorporates sightings from the public through the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline, the Oregon Flora Atlas, and iNaturalist. So they're doing a ton of great work to raise awareness of invasive species. Lindsay Wise is the data manager, and she's doing a phenomenal job managing both platforms and sharing data throughout the state. So a big thanks to Lindsay for compiling these statistics for me. So in the entire Oregon IMAP data set, there are over 440,000 locations for 436 species in Oregon. And from that, 121 organizations have contributed locations for those species. In 2022 alone, there was over 3,000 total observations for 116 species. About 300 of those fall in the Clackamas, Multnomah, or Washington counties. The most reported species statewide was slender false brome, and the most reported species in the 4-county region is probably no surprise to all of you, but it was garlic mustard. So as you all are preparing your budgets this winter, spring, please consider contributing to IMAP invasives and the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline. Lindsay and I are going to work up a support request in the next couple months and get that out sometime in March. So please keep an eye out, share it with your managers and directors for consideration. And thank you to the organizations who have been contributing to both of these platforms. Many are in the 4-county region, and we greatly appreciate all of your help and support. So a few projects I've been working on this winter. One is a coastal invasive species and exotic pest workshop. So the Western Invasives Network is pairing with the Washington Invasive Species Council. We received funding from USDA's APHIS to plan a coastal invasive species workshop. It's going to be held in person in Astoria sometime early April. I believe we're going to set the date tomorrow, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn about regional pests, plant pathogens, and other invasive species. So we anticipate pesticide recertification credits and plenty of networking opportunities. And this event is modeled after events like Pull Together, but specifically the Columbia Gorge Invasive Species and Exotic Pest Workshop hosted by the Columbia Gorge CWMA. They are hosting their 12th annual next month. So a big shout out to them for all of their hard work with the event. I've also been invited to speak at the upcoming Washington State Weed Coordinators Association Conference in March about our CWMAs in Oregon and the wider WIN network. So it's going to be a great chance to share the success of our CWMAs in the state and hopefully spark the formation of a few more in Washington. I've also been assisting several CWMAs with renewing and establishing MOUs and other agreements to help keep them designated as CWMAs. And lastly, I'm bringing the WIN quarterly newsletter back to life. So this is something that Troy launched back in 2020, and it's been a super informative resource for the CWMAs and organizations throughout the state and even beyond. It's been about a year since the last edition. So right now I'm looking for any invasive species content to feature. So if you have projects, job postings, invasive species alerts, events, really anything you want to highlight, please send it my way and I'll promote it for you. I'm asking for submissions by February 3rd, and I'll be sure to remind you all over the Willamette Weeds listserv. So all of this will be covered in and more in the newsletter. So with that, I just want to thank the Fauquier County CWMA for inviting me today, and all of their committees and planners for keeping the ship afloat after my departure. I have several pull-togethers under my belt, and I know it's no easy task without a coordinator. So great job to all of you. Thanks so much for having me, and please reach out if I can support your work in any way.
Thank you, Courtney. It's great to see you back, and we look forward to working with you more in your new role.
Likewise. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. So moving ahead in the agenda, we will have a demonstration of the Fauquier County CWMA data standardization template. For that, I'd like to welcome in Tyler Pedersen and Eli Staggs. Tyler is with Tualatin Soil Water Conservation District and manages the invasive species program. And he is also the chair of our mapping and data committee. Eli is an invasive species tech at Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District and the vice chair of the mapping and data committee. So Tyler and Eli.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Looks great,
good.
Tyler.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I'm with, I guess I'm the chair of the Mapping and Data Committee, Eli Staggs, vice chair. I've been chair since 2020, and Eli has been vice chair since the beginning of last year. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Mapping and Data Committee, we seek to promote the understanding of the region's invasive plant threats through data management, data analyses, mapping, and information sharing. And the standardized data collection template was identified by the committee as a high priority work plan item that has taken over 2 years to complete. And we're excited to unveil the template in pre-built forms to a larger audience today, and I hope people find them useful. So the purpose of the template is to provide a ready-to-use field data collection tool to organizations with ArcGIS Online. This tool matches the NISMA standards. NISMA stands for North American Invasive Species Management Association, and they also match the recommendations of IMAP invasives. So some of the positive outcomes of organizations using this template: integration of data into a collective data set. So that could be anything from IMAP invasives, EdMaps, and Weed Mapper. Also increases the collective utility of invasive plant data. So the data sets can contribute to regional weed analysis, including presence-only habitat suitability modeling and invasive plant prioritization modeling. And the collective data sets are fundamental to objective risk assessments and crafting an effective management strategy for a given weed. So why do we use Esri? So Esri is a platform that's created ArcGIS products like ArcPro, ArcGIS Online, and Field Maps. And so we did a survey here about 2 years ago in 2020 that revealed that a majority of CWMA members use Esri software to collect data for invasive species. In this case, over half respondents used Collector for ArcGIS, which is Collector right now is now field maps. And so that's kind of the basis for why we decided to use that platform for this template. And in the future, we're looking to create some tools for non-Esri users that match the 4-county CWMA invasive plant data standards. And then what can you expect to see? So if you're using this template, what are some of the products? So integration of data sets using the standardized collection template will produce more complete information on status and size of infestations. Was it treated, when, who treated it, and then also up-to-date distribution maps of species. And you can see there in the bottom left, that's a example map from IMAP invasives. That's just for garlic mustard distribution. And then you can compare that to our 4-county CWMA priority species distribution map on the right. And that's kind of what you can expect to see from data collected using the template and shared share with the CWMA. And you can see the call out box there with some of the data fields, and then this different species you can select to see their distribution on the map there on the left. And so we do have data sharing agreements. So partners, if they want to share their data, they can either add it to our public or confidential map. And then we also have data use agreements if partners want us to share the collective data set with them.
Okay, I'm noticing there's a couple of comments in here about the presentation being very blurry, and I'm not sure if we can address that right away. Andrew, do you have any suggestions?
I just changed the sharing settings, so folks who it was a little blurry, let me know if that has fixed the issue, and if not, we can make sure to share the presentation in that follow-up email so folks can look back at the presentation slides.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so part of this presentation is going to be a pre-recorded video. That's a good suggestion. So part of this demonstration is going to be a pre-recorded video with Lucas Nip from East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District, where we're going to go through the steps to acquire the template and use the field map form on your phone. And then we're going to interact with the layer. I'm going to share my screen and just show how this form got used out in the field. And for those of you who submitted their ArcGIS Online usernames prior to this event, you can open up field maps on your phone, and there should be a group with a map in there called the Pull Together Example Map, and you can open it up and drop points yourself. So when we get to that point, I'll mention it again. So Tyler, you can move on to the pre-recorded video.
All right, I am with Lucas at East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. He and his organization are interested in using the standardized data collection template created by the Mapping and Data Committee. The committee has created a tool for anyone to use if they have ArcGIS Pro, so they have immediate access to a data collection form in field maps. And so after Lucas receives an email with this tool and a few minor customizations that he'll make on his end, he can open field maps on his phone and begin collecting data in just a few minutes. So Lucas is going to show us those steps to access this template, and you can take it away.
All right, well, thanks, Eli. As Eli mentioned, the Mapping and Data Committee has created a ready-to-use field collection form and some tools to allow those who like to get it to download it and get it running on their phone very simply. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. We're going to start with this email that Eli sent to me. I'm going to save this attachment, which is the actual tool. So I'm going to save that on my desktop. I go find that here in my blank project on ArcGIS Pro. I need to open my catalog pane. Go to the toolboxes. I'm going to add that toolbox that I just saved, that attachment that Eli just sent to me.
Hey, Tyler, I think the video paused if you want to try to start it again.
I'm going to expand that and I'm going to run the tool here right now. Need to enter my ArcGIS Online credentials. And by doing this, I am saving the template straight to my ArcGIS Online. So I can do a couple of customization steps and then be ready to use this in the field. All right, well, that ran successfully. So now I'm going to open ArcGIS Online. I'm going to refresh so that feature layer that I just downloaded through that toolbox pops up. You see that's now hosted by my organization. So I'm going to click on that and do a few things here before I open it in the Field Maps app. First, I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to make it so it's not public. So it's only going to be accessed by my organization. Next, I'm going to go, and this is a cool feature, and you can do this for other fields as well, but I'm going to go and add in the observer names of my staff. So when they go to use this in the field, there's going to be a drop down for their names. So I'm going to add me and my coworkers here. So that's all I'm going to do in ArcGIS Online. Now I'm going to open Field Maps app. I'm going to open this map that came to me through the execution of that tool. And I'm going to set some defaults. So I need to hit this add fields here. I'm going to ask it to only show the fields that are in my form because this form that Eli sent me, this is kind of the bare bones, high priority fields that will get you all the data you need to submit to the local invasive species databases. So data source for my organization is always going to be EMSWCD. So I'm going to enter that. States are going to be a drop down. I'm going to make it default to Oregon. County, I'm going to make it default to Multnomah. And observer name, we'll make it a default to my main man, Chris Aldashi. From here, I'm going to hit save. And I'm ready to open Field Maps and use this form. Okay, well, here I am on the Field Map apps on my phone, and I'm going to show you what that form looks like and kind of how it's used. So here I am on my home screen of Field Maps. You see on the top the pull together example field collection map. That's the map that originally came from the 4-county CWMA map and data group from that email. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on the plus sign to start storing a point. And here you're going to see that form. So here's all the fields you saw that that came on that form that was sent over to me from the 4 counties CWMA map and data subcommittee. I will point out this is fully customizable. If you want other fields, they're in there. They're kind of drag and drop. This form that we showed you today that was sent to me in the email is kind of your high priority minimum fields. It's going to give you high quality, consistent data for your organization that's sortable and usable, and also that's going to be easy to submit high quality data to all the regional invasive species databases. So I can go to my observer name here. It's going to have that default I said is Chris Aldashi, but I can select my own name. Already has the data source, my organization, the date. I'm going to auto populate there. Common name. I'm going to filter for garlic mustard. The state and the county are already populated because I did those defaults you saw previously. Patch size. Again, this is in square feet, but it's really easy to select either square meters or acres or hectares, and we can show you how to do that if that's what you want to do. Percent cover, and then control type. So if we don't do any, I can select none. If I did chemical, I can select chemical, and then there's a comments field. I can take a photo. And now I have all the fields filled out. Store that point. And that's pretty much it for this form. You now saw how in about 5 minutes I received the form from the CWMA. I did some simple customizations. Again, there's a lot more you can do if you would like, but this will give you the high quality, high priority fields that will give you standardized and consistent data for your organization and for the regional databases. And then you saw how it functions on my phone. Thank you.
Okay, Tyler, do you mind unsharing your screen so I can broadcast my phone? Thank you. It's funny how we do all of these things ahead of time to avoid technical difficulties, and they still sometimes happen. But I hope that when I share my screen, you will all be able to see this. If you can't, let me know. All right. Is this semi-legible for people?
That looks good, Eli.
Okay, great. So if you already submitted your ArcGIS Online username and you were invited to the 4 County CWMA data collection template sharing group, in your field maps, if you scroll down to the bottom, there should be an area called groups, and you can find our CWMA and then open up the map that's in there. And if you open in the map, you will be able to submit points, and this is just a testing little spot so we can show off some of the variations of this form that your organization could build out. But we do have some pre-built ones, and an example of that would be using this Polygon template to collect treatment data. And in here, there is a little bit more information that you can collect than the example that Lucas showed. So you can still take photos, and you can still list out your observer names. And there are some default answers about where this data source is and what state and county it's happening in. And you can submit your observation date. But one cool thing is, I know that I don't have taxonomic serial numbers or scientific name memorized, but I'm pretty okay at remembering common names. So if I'm out in the field and I find a patch of garlic mustard, but I don't know what the scientific or taxonomic serial number is, I have this form configured to auto-generate those names and numbers for myself. So that's going to work for any of the species that we have listed and provided to you in this form. You can indicate different field information about whether or not this population has been submitted to Weedmapper before. You can still indicate what the control type is. But also, if your organization wants to keep track of who the land ownership was, what category, You can fill out that information. And for data for OWeb grants, you can collect information for site types. And then another nifty thing is and when you collect a polygon point and you get your area configured, it'll tell you ahead of time the area of that polygon if you're very accurate about when you're out in the field measuring it. And you can submit your patch size. 0.55 acres is what it's telling me at the top, but then it'll convert that to the square feet for you. And if you're estimating your percent cover, maybe this was just a 75% cover, it'll also automatically calculate your net patch size, so you don't have to do that later on. And then you can fill out other information about the phenology of that plant. Maybe right now, because it's the middle of winter, our garlic mustard is in the rosette stage and there was no area in the creek. And there is no creek here. So there's a lot of things you can do with this template to customize it and make the form fit what your organization needs. And I just wanted to show that off to you all today. And I hope some of y'all were able to drop points, but I think we're ready to open it up to any questions or comments people might have.
Right on. So we have one question from Paul, wanting to know if this template could be used for EAB surveys as well, or is there another official template that's been recommended?
Tyler, could you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, our template's more for invasive plants. There is currently a Survey 123 template that's being used by ODA and ODF and other partners involved with EAB. So that would probably be the best place to start, but we're asking that not be used. Like, that's not really like a public template. It's for professionals on the ground monitoring ash trees and looking for EAB damage. So that would probably be the best option for that.
One thing about this form is you can add, if there's species not listed on this form that your organization is interested in collecting, you can add them in. We'll be updating the species list periodically to match what the technical committee has listed as CWMA listed species. But if there are other ones, you can always add those in. Do we have access to the query? Excuse me. Do we have access to query the data we enter? Could we get a report of some kind, for example, of all the reports PPR entered for a particular weed or time span? Yeah, so with this template, if your organization chooses to use it, it's entirely in your possession. So all the data collected is in your hands, and you can run queries on the data that you enter with ArcGIS Online, and you can run reports on that, absolutely.
So another question that's come in on Q&A, how will this data be used? Will it be submitted or reviewed by county weed control agencies?
That's up to the organization. So once you use this template, it's no longer in the CWMAs. We can't see the data that you collected once we share this template with you. And that it'll be up to the organization if they want to share it back to any collective data sets, whether that's Weed Map or IMAP invasives or the CWMA. But if you run this tool that Lucas showed, we won't be able to see, or any other organization or the public will not be able to see the data that you collect. Are the map options all useful and integratable? Point data, polygons, and lines. Sarah, could you speak a little bit more about this question? I'm not sure I'm understanding. Oh, sure. Yeah, so whether or not you choose point or polygon is up to you and your organization's preferences. Polygons are helpful for capturing in a visual way the size, but point information, you can still collect that relevant information about the size and extent and percent cover of those infestations. So whether or not you choose point or polygon, those are still both legitimate and useful ways of capturing that information. Laura, you could. I would suggest that if you choose to adopt this template, choosing point or polygon, one or the other, that way all your data is in one place. When you do a polygon and over the years, the weed patches change. Can you change the polygons? How do you manage that? Well, I think each year you return, you might be collecting a new data set in which you would have, 2023's polygon size. And if you went back out in 2024, you might have a fresh data set or a fresh template that is empty. And when you return in 2024, you drop a new polygon. And if that extent has changed, you would be able to compare those two polygons year to year internally. Yeah. But you can change the polygons. You could see them on top of each other. The plan is for this template is to have one for each year, because there will be species updates and general changes to some of the templates, depending on what people are saying they need out of it or any suggestions that they have. So in 2024, we'll probably have a new one, and you would be able to follow that same step process and see infestations next to each other. All right. And then I think Paul asked if we could send out a step-by-step process for this. And we can absolutely do that. Tyler, we could probably send that out through the listserv if you want to share some details on that.
Yeah, we have a listserv that we can send that out to. If you're not currently on the listserv and you're interested in signing up, you can email either Eli or myself. I think Andrew's going to be sharing that information in the chat. But yeah, happy to have some more participation and get more involvement, and then share this information so that everyone can start using it and also provide feedback. Things aren't working.
Well, great. Thank you, Eli and Tyler, for the great presentation, and also Lucas as well. It's really exciting to see this project come to fruition. If you have additional questions about use of the template, Tyler and Eli's email addresses are posted in the chat. Thank you. And from here, we'll move on to committee updates. We'll have updates from steering, education outreach, mapping and data, and technical and scientific. I'll kick us off with the steering committee update. A couple of the big projects happening right now within the steering committee. We have hired a consultant from Redline Media to work with us on a new website project. So we kicked this project off in December, and we are expecting to have a new website up and running by May of this year. So we're currently in the development phase on that within the steering committee, and we look forward to having that product ready for you to see comes late spring. As we mentioned, Courtney has moved on to the written coordinator position, and so we're in the process of hiring the new Fork County CWMA coordinator, which is expected to, we're hoping to have in place by February. And just a reminder that position within the Fort County CWMA is housed at Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District as part of the WeedWise program, and is a quarter time with the Fort County CWMA and a quarter time with the Columbia Gorge CWMA. So it's a shared position. We are interested in potentially expanding the role of the Fort County CWMA coordinator in the future. And so we have started having discussions within steering about doing some planning around what that could potentially look like. So over the next year or so, that is something we will be more diligently putting the pieces together on. And lastly, the Fort County CWMA annual report is under development, and you should see that coming here sometime in the next month as well. So those are the updates from steering. I'm going to pass this on to the Education and Outreach Committee update, and that will be Mitch Bixby, who's been running the City of Portland's Early Detection Rapid Response Program since 2008 and has been active within the Fort County CWMA since 2005. Got a Master's of Environmental Science from Portland State and a BA in Medieval History from the University of North Carolina. Mitch, whenever you're ready.
Right on. Well, the report for the year is pretty uncomplicated. Not surprisingly, winter is when we get a lot of our writing work done. And so this past year, that's been focused on trying to get some material rewritten for the website. That's going to happen again this year. Through spring into summer, that's when everyone loses their minds in field season. So not much happens. And then towards the end of the summer, we get back into the groove for planning pull together, which was a little bit more of a lift this year than past. So that's kind of the report from the year. My term is up, I believe. My 2 years is up fairly soon. So I can't say exactly what's going to be happening for the rest of the year, but stay tuned. That's my report.
Thank you, Mitch. From there, we'll pass it back to Tyler Pedersen for the Mapping and Data Committee update. Tyler.
Hello again. Yeah, so this past year, a lot of the committee's time was spent on creating the standardized data collection templates, testing them with partners, and addressing feedback. Want to give a special thanks to Eli Staggs for his efforts creating the template and the pre-built forms, and Lucas Knipp for his willingness to test them out and essentially be our guinea pig. We of course welcome feedback from anyone using the template, and we'll continue to provide one-on-one support. And then we're also going to be looking at in the coming year, beginning to create some guidance for integration of the template with non-ArcGIS platforms. Currently, we're in the process of updating our work plan for 2023, and we welcome feedback from current committee members or new members. And this year, we will be encouraging partners to demonstrate and share real-life success stories about the value of data sharing to manage weeds. And then if you're interested in attending our meetings or participating on the committee, you can email either myself or Eli. Our next committee meeting is going to be on February 8th, and that goes from 8:30 to 9:50 a.m. and it's probably going to be virtual. We're going to be emailing out an agenda with the virtual meeting link a week beforehand, and we hope to see you there. And I want to thank everyone again for letting me talk, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of the pull together.
Thank you, Tyler. So moving on to the Technical and Scientific Committee update. Michelle Delapine coordinates the Early Detection and Rapid Response Program for the West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District in Portland. She serves on the steering committee for the Fort County Cooperative Weed Management Area and chairs the Technical and Science Review Committee. She also co-founded the Pacific Northwest Garlic Mustard Working Group and has actively managed garlic mustard, among other target weeds, in Western Multnomah County since 2011. Michelle?
Thanks, Aaron. Hey, everyone. So just a real quick update from the Technical and Scientific Review Committee. And the past several months, we've been working on updating the 4-county CWMA weed list. This is a list of over 300 species of potential concern, ranked on based on abundance in the CWMA and the concern for how invasive it is. So I'll just hit a couple highlights. We moved sunderflower thistle and leafy spurge from a B to an A based on there being few observations in the CWMA area. We moved several species to the agricultural weeds category, such as mole plant. And then several species we moved from B to C because they were just too widespread to be considered B anymore, such as butterfly bush, meadow knapweed, Norway maple, tree of heaven, and clematis, the talba. And then milk thistle we left as an A, but we're interested in reports of milk thistle from around the 4 counties. So maybe email me. I'll put my email in the chat if you have any milk thistle reports, and we can consider those in our listing. And then we moved Ludwigia, Peploides, and Hexapatella from needs investigation to B, which is probably a little overdue. And there is a list that you can find on the CWMA that is in the technical committee folder in the website, and that will be updated soon with our new list. We also looked at Bassland and Garland 3A efficacy for this past spring. A lot of garlic mustard work was done with 1.6% Bassland and a 1% rodeo mix in order to get around limitations with the Garland 3A. And this generally worked good if it was applied early in the season, but less so late in the season. For those folks that could keep using Garland 3A, generally had good results, with one exception where there was potentially some regrowth. And then the committee's also been looking at net sulfuron methyl, or Escort XP, which is a post-emergent with residual properties, can be used up to the water's edge. It does have some limitations on types of land that it can be used on, but otherwise it looks like a promising herbicide for garlic mustard, blackberry, and then there's been some arum trials that Portland Parks are doing using Escort. And it's another tool in the toolbox to mix up mode of action instead of other herbicides such as aminopyrrolid. We've also been tracking EAB infestation, and also are going to be meeting on February 8th from 11 to 11:50. So hope you can join us. If you're not currently on the technical committee listserv, please also send me an email or send an email to the coordinator, and we'll get you set up on the listserv, or just come to our meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. So that wraps up our committee updates, and we'll be moving into the presentation phase in the morning. Just a note, we'll be holding questions until the end of both presentations, and then invite Alex and Mariah to join us after their presentations to answer your questions. So to begin, we'll be starting with the Emerald Ash Borer and Oregon update. And this Alex Gorman and Mariah Davis. Alex is an assistant professor of practice and extension forester at Oregon State University. Alex received his undergraduate degree in forestry from Cal Poly Humboldt in 2018 and his graduate degree in natural resources from the University of Minnesota in 2022. Alex's graduate work focused on the regeneration of black spruce amidst stands facing dwarf mistletoe infestations. Alex currently sits on the steering committee of the Oregon EAB Task Force and leads the task force training and technical assistance subcommittee. Mariah Davis received her undergraduate degree in environmental science from Portland State University before getting her start as a field technician with the agricultural consulting company in Willamette Valley. Mariah joined USDA APHIS as a seasonal invasive insect trapper before assuming the role of pest survey specialist in 2020. As pest survey specialist, she works closely with the state and federal partners to coordinate statewide early detection rapid response activities related to novel and invasive insect pests, including emerald ash borer, spongy moth, spotted lanternfly, and the northern giant hornet. With that, Alex, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, let me just start sharing my screen. Okay. Always have troubles sharing on. There we go. Can we see that? Hey, Aaron.
Yep, that looks good, Alex.
Cool. So this is going to be a pretty short and sweet introductory to emerald ash borer in Oregon, kind of what to look for both EAB and ash. I know a lot of us work with ash frequently, if not daily, but just a little refresher on what we can see, both street trees and also natural, and then what is kind of going on with the statewide task force that Aaron mentioned for Oregon. So just a quick refresher on Oregon ash. So it goes all the way up into southern BC and then down all the way down to the southern tip of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. So it is our only native ash fractionous species in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And about 80% of it occurs below 1,000 feet, and a lot of that being within the Willamette Valley, along the Columbia River. And then here is our risk map that was produced by Oregon Department of Forestry, and it just shows where EAB might crop up in association with those wetland ash stands. You can see most of it is along the Willamette River, and then some along the Columbia in Columbia County. So I want to also overlay that with the risk map with the endangered species, mostly the salmonids, and unfortunately they overlay quite well. So a lot of our threatened and endangered salmonid species are likely to be affected by the loss of stream side ash, both increasing water temperature from loss of ash and the destabilization of stream sides from the loss of ash. So for those who primarily work in urban and community forestry settings, there are a number of ash species that you're likely to see. We have white ash or American ash. Let's see, why did that? There we go. Green ash, also very common. There is the European or the common ash. If you're driving along Highway 30 going to St. Helens, this stuff is everywhere. Along with Raywood ash is also very common in Columbia County. And just want to note that European mountain ash is not a fraxinus. It's not a true ash. So I get a lot of questions about, are my European ash, my mountain ash going to be fine? They'll be fine because they're not a fractionous species. And I do quickly want to mention that EAB can theoretically infest any species in the Oleaceae, the olive family, and so we are worried about true olives, especially getting into Southern Oregon, Northern California. There aren't any documented cases of true olives in orchards being infected, but it has happened in a laboratory setting, and then also fringe tree, but fringe trees are not very common. So EAB today is the most expensive and damaging pest that North America has seen. It's killed hundreds of millions of trees with upwards of 95% mortality, and it facilitates a really high economic and a really high ecological cost. And a lot of those ecological costs we'll see in Oregon, aside from our loss of Oregon ash, have to do with those stream side destabilizations and increasing water temperatures, and those effects will have on those endangered and threatened salmonid species and other species. And then from an economic standpoint, a lot of that will fall, unfortunately, on county level, all across county homeowner most likely, hasn't happened yet in Oregon, but that's what we've seen across the country. Trees get more expensive to remove as they die. So getting into a little bit of just little entomology, little insect ID. So the emerald ash borer is what we call a flat-headed borer. And the larvae for these are really distinct. They have these bell-shaped segments. And for EAB, when they're their fourth larval instar, their biggest, they'll be about 3 centimeters long. The largest larval stage is actually quite a bit longer than the actual adult insect. And they're, like I said, they're flat, and this is what they look like in situ on the left in a piece of ash. But they're, again, not very big, but they're larger than the adult, which seen here, especially on the picture, right there on the right side of the person's finger, they're quite small, only about a quarter inch to half inch long and about 1/8 of an inch wide. So they're really small. They're really green metallic. They do have some purple, under the elytra, under their wings, but they're really, for the most part, the same shade of that metallic green. And in Oregon, this is a great lookalike produced by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. In Oregon, we've got a lot of relatively small green shiny insects. However, EAB is the only one that's both, up to a half inch long at most, and also 1/8 of an inch wide. So we can see other, our other buprestids, metallic wood boring beetle, the golden buprestid, are roughly a half inch long, but they're much wider than 1/8 of an inch. And here's just another side-by-side comparison of buprestids or flathead borers. So, and we can see EAB is, it can fit happily on a dime. So very small. So when we're thinking about, how does EAB manifest itself in ash trees around the community, 3 really big symptoms that I look for and that, we have in our toolbox are canopy thinning and dieback, epicormic sprouting, and woodpecker damage. So canopy thinning, ash, especially towards the end of summer, they're summer deciduous, they can kind of look sad. But especially in the spring, if an ash tree isn't fully leafed out when all the other trees are, especially ash, that's kind of cause for concern. And then that coupled with epicormic sprouting, which is just a stress response. And so both canopy thinning and tip dieback and epicormic sprouting can happen for a number of reasons. But those 2 combined, and then especially if we see woodpecker damage, and we call them in the Midwest ghost trees because the woodpeckers flake off all that bark and they turn a ghostly white. That's a cause for concern, especially because woodpeckers have no business flaking off the bark of trees unless there's some sort of food source underneath. So two big signs left by the insect are D-shaped exit holes. It'll be about 1/8 of an inch in diameter because the insect is about 1/8 of an inch wide. And then also these S or serpentine shaped galleries. That is like our fingerprint or EAB's calling card, if you will. Pretty distinct on ash. And so all of these, are tools we have in our toolbox to identify EAB. Any one thing, on its own should be a cause, for maybe should pique my interest, but all of them together really is, a good indicator that ash is infected. So, and lastly, another, kind of sign are these bark splits, which the Oregon ash tree in Joseph Gale Park it was quite infested. And so it had a good amount of bark splitting. And so sometimes you can actually see the S-shaped galleries through the bark split. So going into the EAB task force, so it's led by the Oregon Department of Agriculture and it's facilitated by the Oregon Invasive Species Council and comprised of members from more than 40 agencies, which is really incredible. And it got off the ground really quickly. By early August, we were having our first, statewide, region-wide task force meeting, and it's comprised of 7 subcommittees. So communication, research, integrated pest management and pest management practices, training and technical assistance, wood waste utilization, surveying, monitoring, and funding. If you haven't seen already, the IPM BMP subcommittee just came out with a really awesome document outlining what you should do or what you can do if you have infested ash in your area or if you're close by. And so that's pretty pertinent for the 4 counties because it's all relatively close to the initial site in Forest Grove. We're also working on the research and IPM committee. We're working on a document that goes into alternatives to planting ash recommendations, as we're working through this. So, and a wood waste publication is also soon to come out. So if you have any questions regarding the task force, feel free to let me know and I can always answer those. Or if you'd like to join the task force, they're open to the public, and same with joining the subcommittees. So please let me know and I can always forward you an invitation link. So, and just a few, I'm not going to get super into really any management considerations because that's going to follow my presentation, but some questions I like to pose to, when I'm giving these talks are, what ash trees are on your property right now? If you have any, maybe you have a whole bunch. And if you do, what values, what do you want that to look like after EAB comes through? So just some, some things to chew on. So we're going to have to hold questions till the end, but that is it for my presentation. Thank you all so much.
Moving on to Mariah.
Hello, I'm here. How do I share my screen? Hold on. Share screen. Oh, 1 second. Trying to find my presentation screen. Too many screens. I think it's this one. Okay, can you see the presentation and without the notes?
Yep, I can see it says biology at the top. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit more about like visual survey. I guess I'll just skim some of that stuff. Okay, so yeah, my name is Mariah Davis. Oh wait, you want to see my face, I'm sure. Hold on. Can I turn my camera on? I think I have to stop sharing to, oh, here we go.
Yeah, you should have a start video. There
Okay.
you go. Perfect.
All right, great. Hello, my name is Mariah Davis. I'm the pest survey specialist with USDA, APHIS, PPQ in Portland. I've been spending quite a bit of time on EAB recently, but normally I do a lot of work with spongy moth and spotted lanternfly, northern giant hornet, whatever other big bad bug might pop up. And so let's see. You'll really only see adult beetles flying in late spring through the summer. They'll peak in late May or peak in late June, and then will have mostly died off by fall. And by fall, the eggs have hatched, the larvae have gone under the bark, and they will start feeding on the cambium layer of the tree, which is what really does a lot of the damage. They will ultimately, after a few years, effectively girdle the tree, which is a bummer. But so EAB was first detected in the US in 2002 in Michigan. And we suspect that it arrived on solid wood packaging material originating from Asia. And it's notoriously difficult to detect and treat on a large scale. We don't have the tools available to eradicate at this time, not in terms of detection or treatment on a large scale. There's effective management options on a small scale, which I'll talk about later. And then there are some long-term suppression options as well. But so it was detected in 2002, and you can see it's spread through most of the eastern United States in the last 20 years. A lot of this was is through unintentional human mediated transport. It doesn't disperse very quickly on its own. And so an effective EAB response is going to depend heavily on an IPM strategy. Integrated pest management is a systematic approach to realistic pest management. Informed practices establish clear goals that survey, timely decision-making, and appropriate methods and materials will support. A realistic management goal will vary a lot depending on your situation. So a landowner with a couple of trees in their yard, or a city with a handful of trees in a park, or a land managing agency responsible for thousands of trees will all have different goals, different strategies based on available resources in terms of both costs and effectiveness.
Hey, Maria.
Yes.
Just sorry to interrupt. Your slides aren't advancing. I'm not sure if they're supposed to or not.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at my presenter mode. Dang. Let's see. How do you, it seemed like it was working when I was practicing. Hold on. I'm just going to stop sharing and then kind of see if, one second.
If you want to try to maybe reshare, and there might be, I don't know if there's a small arrow in the bottom left corner in the presenter mode.
I can reshare. Sorry about that. Okay. And then what? Sorry.
Yeah, there might be is there a small arrow in the bottom left corner?
Bottom left corner of my screen?
Of your screen, yeah, on the presenter mode.
No.
Do you want to maybe try clicking on the slide itself and see if that might advance it?
Sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, here we go. So sorry, this was the map that I was trying to show earlier about expansion. And so the lighter shades are 2001 and before. And then the darker shades are going to be the more recent detections, and this is by county. You can actually go on, the link is at the bottom of the slide, and it's interactive, so you can toggle the different years on and off. And you can also type in an address to see if it's within an area that has EAB or not. I'm gonna go to the next slide. And then I think this is where I was at. So informed practices are establish clear goals that survey, timely decision-making, and appropriate methods and materials will support. A phased response starts with prevention, prepares for timely intervention, and will ultimately move towards suppression if needed. I'm going to talk about all of those steps in just a moment here. There are things we can do to prevent the spread of EAB. Well, slow it really, detect it early, and detecting it early is going to facilitate making those timely decisions and having more effective intervention and suppression. Prevention is the first line of defense, and not moving firewood is really important. In areas that they saw it spread really quickly in the eastern US, this is a really common practice that people do. There are other transportation of EAB through like the nursery trade of ash stock and commercial firewood, wood waste. But not moving firewood is something that we can all do to help slow the spread. And the rule established by ODA is that firewood should never be moved more than 50 miles. Less than 10 miles is best. It's also illegal to bring untreated firewood into the Pacific Northwest from other states, the Pacific Northwest being Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Oh, and untreated firewood, if you are going to buy commercial firewood, if it's treated, it will should say approved Pacific Northwest firewood or approved pest-free on the packaging. And another thing to keep in mind on the topic of human-mediated transport of EAB is that adults can fly like up to 6 miles, but they generally will emerge and then lay their eggs pretty close to the same place. Their average natural dispersal is up to 2 miles, but oftentimes is less than half a mile. And so left to their own devices, they won't make it very far very fast. And so, yeah, a lot of the range expansion that we've seen, like in terms of growth, but also satellite populations is the result of EAB getting moved around in wood one way or another. I'm going to kind of just skip over these visual detection methods, but it is probably the best way to look for EAB, and the more people we have out there looking for these signs and symptoms. Oh my gosh, my slide again. Sorry about that. Yeah, the more people that are out there looking, the better, because there's only so many of us, and there's a lot of trees. And so, yeah, these are kind of the more confirmatory symptoms, as if you are finding the S-shaped galleries, D-shaped exit holes, or obviously larvae in adults. If you're wanting to practice or learn more about visual survey for EAB and other forest pests, I do recommend the online forest pest detector training. It's a great resource. It's on the OSU Extension site. It's free to the public. And then if you do find EAB or suspect that you have found evidence of EAB, we are asking people to report it to the online Oregon Invasive Species Hotline. And it's really easy. The link is here. And we do ask that you submit as much documentation as possible. So if you can capture a live insect, that's always the best. And a photo of the actual specimen is also great, but photos of D-shaped exit holes or the serpentine galleries is also really good documentation. At the very least, it would be really helpful for reviewing to have photos of the host tree along with any visible signs of infestation. So that canopy, dieback, bark splits, woodpecker damage. And then also cataloging ash trees into iNaturalist can be helpful, because then we'll have just more information about where the trees are so that we can periodically go and look at them, or maybe put out some traps, which This is what the traps look like. There's two different types of approved traps. There's the purple prism traps and the green funnel traps. They're both paired with a lure. And so they're not quite as effective as visual survey, but depending on your situation, this might be more realistic. They do have to be checked periodically. And if you see either of these things hanging in a tree out in the world, they are probably for EAB. They can be used for other insects, but at this time, there's a really high probability that their intended target is EAB. Once EAB has made it into your area or potentially your site or your tree, an early stage option for intervention is trunk injection. So if you're still in the less than 20% canopy decline range of damage, meaning that beyond that, the tree is less likely to survive even if you do inject it. And if you decide to go this route, or, when deciding if you are going to go this route, I should say, some things to consider is weighing the costs of injection versus removal up front. It's going to be less expensive to treat the tree, but you will have to continue doing it every year or every few years, depending on the product. And it does require a professional pesticide applicator to come out and do the treatment as well. It is safe for people, for pollinators, for natural enemies, not for leaf feeders. And it does also work with trap trees, which I will talk about, and biocontrol. I'll go over that in just a minute too. And so it's good to start thinking about this now. If you are responsible for ash trees, we recommend waiting until the EAB has been found within 2 miles of the trees as kind of the higher end of being careful. If you want to wait to treat a tree until the EAB are present, then just catching it before it gets to that 20% decline is really key.
Hey, Mariah,
Yes.
you've got a couple minutes left.
Okay. No problem. I'm getting close to the end here. Okay, and so then that brings me to trap trees, which does not save the tree, sadly, but it can protect the trees around it in the early stages of infestation. Low to moderate infested areas, you can girdle the tree where you remove the outer layer for about 6 inches band around the entire tree. And then you can either treat the tree, so all of the EAB that go to it will die from the treatment, or you can wait until all of the adults have come to it and laid their eggs, and then remove the tree and dispose of it. And this helps slow down the growth of the population and protects the trees around it, because the EAB are 5 to 10 times more attracted to girdled trees than healthy trees. Which brings me to my last topic, suppression. So suppression is a long-term strategy, and the purpose is not eradication. Obviously, it's just to bring the EAB population into a more sustainable level. Biological control agents, there are a few of them that are approved. They are all very host specific, thoroughly researched, and stingless to humans. And so we are this is in the works here in Oregon. We're looking for sites so that we can get these guys out there and hopefully get ahead of the curve. Oops, too far. Well, I don't know how to go backwards. The last slide basically just said that you want to cut down and dispose of wood waste. So when you do eventually have to remove trees, it can be done preemptively. It can be done once an infestation has been detected, or it can be done after the infestation has taken its course. Trees that are left standing do become hazardous to human health and property. They're more expensive to remove. But regardless, at whatever phase, if you do need to remove an ash tree, it's best to do it between October and March, because that's when the adults are not active. And all of the wood needs to be disposed of properly by April 15th. Between April 15th and October is when adults are active. Those trees really should only be removed if it's an absolute necessity due to some hazard. And yeah, so just, I recommend, if you are responsible for ash trees, to start thinking about this stuff now and getting a plan together. And that's it. So if you can learn more about our plan in Oregon in the Oregon Readiness and Response Plan. There's tons of information about EAB and biological control and all of this stuff on the APHIS EAB program page. And then you can contact me if you have questions about anything that I talked about. You can also send questions to the EAB ODA mailbox. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks, Mariah. So there's a handful of questions still in the Q&A section. Alex has been busily answering questions along the way. So if you wanted to dig into some of those questions, they're all under the answered tab, I believe.
Sure.
But I'm going to read some of them.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a recommendation of when to begin focused survey efforts for EAB for a large property with a lot of ash? For example, when EAB get within 5 miles or closer, or when to try trap trees for detection?
So it's really not ever too soon to start doing survey. Yeah, it's really not too soon to start doing survey if you want to just be out looking for signs and symptoms of EAB. And Alex, do you have thoughts on when they would maybe want to consider girdling a tree?
Yeah, so I would say if you're in Washington County, I would survey yesterday.
Yeah.
And if you're in one of the neighboring counties, I would survey today. Because as the EAB flies, it's not that far away. So really, sooner the better, especially if you can get an ash inventory and set up monitoring plots. That's just going to help you in the long run, especially, if EAB doesn't get to where you are in 2 years, great. You have 2 years of awesome data, but rather have that set up than not. And as far as girdling, also, if you're in a neighboring county, if you're in Washington County, it's a good time to start. We're, not really going to be like knocking on people's doors and being like, EAB is 3.25 miles from your ash, please start doing this. But what we can do is like, hey, ash is in this neighboring county or potentially in this close town. So not a bad idea to start doing those, or at least starting to put together a management plan.
I'm going to ask one more question. Thank you. Because we're kind of running out of time. This is, do you have any cost estimate on tree treatment? What licensure is needed to do the treatment?
So, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. The emamectin benzoate systemic trunk injections get pretty pricey. I want to say like $100 an injection.
That's about what I've heard too.
Yeah, and of course, unless your ash tree is very small, you're going to have multiple trunk injections on a single tree. So, and then there's, I don't know off the top of my head, but per inch of diameter, you get more and more you need more chemicals. So it gets pretty costly pretty quickly. I will say the flip side is emamectin benzoate is very effective and is kind of cost to treat versus cost to remove a bunch of dead ash. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, I'm going to close for questions right now. I believe everybody's contacts has been listed. So if you wanted to follow up directly, or if you wanted to keep dropping questions in the Q&A, I'm hoping that Alex and Mariah can hang out a little bit and answer those questions.
Yep, sure can.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mariah and Alex. Those are great updates. And with that, I think we'll transition back to Mitch Bixby again with a new plant species review.
Okie dokie. Looks okay.
Looks great, Mitch.
So this is, so I'm Mitch Bixby. I'm chair of the Outreach and Education Committee, but I'm also on the technical committee. And this is the segment where we try to get a better handle on what folks are seeing out in the world. It is, of course, preferred to do this in person because it's the flow is easier. You can hear more easily what people are saying. But it also does feel like one of these things that we can, it's critical enough that we're going to try to do this remotely. We've got about 15 minutes. And what I'm going to do is list all of well, you can see right here, I've listed all of the species that have come in from folks who have registered for today's event, and a couple of others that got added to the list by members of the technical committee. That's a good long list. I'm happy to see all of these things. It's actually probably too much for us to address in 10, 15 minutes. So what I did is I picked up some of these species to show you all. I'm not going to get into all the ID of some of these because they're a little bit involved, some of them. I just wanted to throw them up there just so you all can get a sense of what other people are seeing. I am leaning towards species, or did lean towards species that are being watched outside of the immediate Portland area, because that's where we're going to more likely see stuff that's coming from. I also focused, I didn't focus as much on species that are pretty broadly distributed already. There's several folks who are asking about shiny leaf geranium. It's pretty common at this point. So I'm not gonna address it in this section, but I just wanted to mention it. That is a thing that people are thinking about. It's not really an early detection species at this point. So I'm just going to jump in on this, and if you've got questions about it, I'm going to do that in the Q&A like all the other questions, Andrew.
We certainly can, Mitch. Yeah, absolutely.
The easiest way to focus these things, and we'll have some time at the end to get into a little bit more discussion if we need it. Also, if we've got time, Angie Kempo and Dominic Mays are doing updates to urbanizing flora for Portland. These are some of the species they are trying to get a handle on. What is anybody seeing them? So I'll probably drop these species in the chat as well, so you all can think about these at your leisure. And I've included their contact information in case we don't get to talking about this list at the end. All right, so Turkish thistle. This is a high priority species. It's an A rank for ODA. I've included their distribution map. You can see, oh yeah, there's some over in the northeast corner of the state. Well, this is a species that's being reported by the folks at Cowlitz County. It's even downriver from us. So the Washington side of the Columbia River, that's unexpected. And so that's a thing that I'm particularly keen to get out, just so you all can start looking for it. The Carduous species, I think, are all pretty hard to distinguish from each other. I think they look quite a bit like slender flower thistle as well as Italian thistle. At some point, we may need to revisit the identification of thistles. That's an ongoing thing in this part of the world. Surprising, because I think of it as more of a dry side species, but these things happen. Colt's foot is another thing that was mentioned in cowlets. You can see the distribution's a little bit more expected for the west side. The leaves, I had a sort of a double take because those look so much like garlic mustard leaves to me, but they're much bigger. They're probably 4 inches, 5 inches across. Also a highly rated, it's a low distribution, so A ranked species by the state. And oblong spurge or ugly spurge, this is something I'm actually working on. I know others in the area are as well. It is not only an A rank species, but it's a T, so it's a target species by the ODA folks. This is a euphorbia that has actually a woody stem, unlike almost every other euphorbia you're going to see in this part of the world, which tend to have kind of squishy stems and they die off every year. Oblong spurge does not, has little tiny yellow flowers, little whorls of leaves. And even so, it's sort of it's a little hard to see. It doesn't look like much, but it can get pretty tall. I've seen it over waist high for me. And velvet leaf. This is one I've only seen a couple of times in the Portland area, but it's one to watch for, given that its distribution is so broad. The state folks listed as a B, but that's one to keep an eye out. And I think this was also on coming out of cowlets, so it's in the vicinity for sure. Arundodonax is one that we know of. Upstream of the Columbia for sure. It's impossible to confuse this with anything else. It's just so tall. I don't think it's on anybody's target list necessarily, but if we're starting to see a lot of these plants, then it probably should be. A couple of shervils made it onto the list. Wild shervil is a species that we know of on the west side, particularly from Forest Park all the way down to southwest into the Riverview area. Rough shervil is all over the Johnson Creek area, southeast Portland. Both of these are in the carrot family, and we actually, the technical committee did a review, an on-site training, not last spring, but the spring before, and has a ID sheet already cooked up. So if you're trying to get a better handle on those, check in with technical, either Michelle Delapine or Justin Cooley. We can get you that sheet. Scypris cyperinus, this came up as a possible new species, but it's also, there seems to be a lack of clarity on whether it's a native or even a naturalized species, depending on which resource you look at. So this is one to watch for, I would say, and it sounds like we'll need to continue to have a discussion about whether this is or is not a target species. And this one came in, this has been identified in Benton County and is being proposed as a potential monitoring species for Washington State. It's a distinctive looking aquatic plant for folks who are doing aquatic work. That's just one to keep in mind. Oops. Multiflora rose, invasive in other parts of the country. I don't know if folks are working on this generally, but it'd be interesting to hear what folks' experience has been with this. And then Juncus and Flexus, this was noted as an issue, the blue arrows cultivar out of Eugene. I don't know as much about this either. And so I wanted to share that with you all and see what anybody thought. And that's my list. So we've got a few minutes. That was really fast. Oh, and I was supposed to mention that because we're doing our little quiz to identify who has been attending, the code word has been for this first portion is EAB. I was supposed to mention that and wave my hands around and make a big show about it. But, that will be useful for you because that quiz is coming up fairly soon. So were there questions that needed to be answered?
There hasn't been very many questions in the Q&A, Mitch. I'm just looking through the chat right now. One kind of comment: Willamette River Keepers and the Yamhill SWC have been treating garden loosestrife, aka yellow loosestrife, along the Willamette. That might be a good one to look at in Portland as well. It's on the ODA A list currently. Somebody's asking for you to repeat the code word.
It was EAB from our previous talk.
Absolutely. So there is a question from somebody in the chat of, I hadn't heard of Scorpius. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the scientific name if you want to look like that. It might be native. They have it in a wetland site and they've been trying to treat it. What would the source for that information be?
So when I'm looking at, this was me looking at which states, the native range of Scorpius cyprinus extends maybe as far as Saskatchewan. I don't remember exactly where else I was looking at, suggested it might even be naturalized in this area. I do know that the Metro folks have seen a fair bit of it in the gorge and are seeing scattered populations of it in throughout the Columbia Slough, and I think Smith and Bybee Lakes as well, which they're going to be managing.
Great. So the last question that we had that just came through the Q&A, are there any lookalikes to velvet leaf? What are some of the key features to identify it?
I don't know if I am qualified to say. This would be, look, we've got a lot of questions in the chat as well. Because we're pretty short on time, I'm wondering if this is a thing that we pull together a response from technical,
Yeah,
and send those out when we can spend a few minutes.
Yeah, we absolutely can do that. I'll go ahead and include your email in the chat, and if anyone has any of those specific questions, does that work? Just to have them reach out to you directly.
That sounds great.
All right,
and we'll collect everything that's already been submitted in the chat.
That sounds wonderful. Thanks, Mitch.
Sure.
Thank you, Mitch. So that concludes the first half of the event. And before you go, just please remember to fill out the quiz, which should be showing up on your screen.
It just launched right now.
And we can't provide applicator credits unless you completely fill out the quiz. So we'll take a quick 15-minute break and we will meet back here at 10:30 to launch into the second half of the day and the next set of presentations, beginning with the alien weeds with Patterson Clark. So see y'all in about 15 minutes.
Hey, Sam.
Welcome, Patterson.
Hi, Patterson.
Can we do a sound check here for a second?
You're sounding
Sure.
good.
Okay, good.
We are back. So welcome back, everyone. I would like to introduce Patterson Clark. Patterson harvests invasive vegetation from which he extracts fibers, pigments, lumber, fuel, and chemicals and recombines them into art. Patterson previously worked at the Washington Post, where he wrote and illustrated the natural history column, Urban Jungle. At Politico, he researched and produced data visualizations about energy and environmental policy. And Patterson, if you're ready to go, you're free to take it away.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'd like to share my screen here. Need to optimize for video. Okay. Is that coming through?
It is. It's a little blurry, Patterson. So I don't know if you want to turn off the video on your present or your video that's showing you currently. That might help the resolution slightly.
How do you recommend doing that?
You just had done it when you hit that stop video icon just previously there.
Okay.
And then if you want to go ahead and play your presentation, you should be good to go.
Sure. All
Great.
right. Is
Thank
that
you.
sharper?
That looks great.
Okay. Well, again, thanks for inviting me to speak. This is a picture of the neighborhood that I live in. It's an urban neighborhood of DC, where I began pulling invasive plants as a volunteer for the National Park Service about 23 years ago. After a few years of pulling, I realized that I developed an antagonistic relationship with these plants and wanted to change that. I didn't want to feel hostile when I was working outside. I still needed to remove the weeds, but I wanted to and create room for invasives to come, for natives to come back in. But I wanted to reform my eradication mindset with a more sustainable attitude of gathering or harvest, to develop ways to make use of this incredible abundance of material that land managers wanted to get rid of. Hopefully, by highlighting some of the inherent value of these plants, I could help draw attention to the ecological threat they pose. I've tried many approaches to making use of alien weeds. A simple approach is just beat birds to the punch by eating the fruit before they get to them. This is wineberry. Here's white mulberry, more of a purebred white mulberry on the right. White mulberry has interbred with the native red mulberry, and so it can also bear black fruits. This is a leatherleaf mahonia. The berries on that are real sweet tart, high in vitamin C. They're a great snack. The birds think they are too, so they eat them and then spread the big seeds everywhere. In the winter, I'll collect, in the spring, I collect flowers from multiflora rose and Japanese honeysuckle and put them through a steam distillation process, extracting hydrosols and essential oils. The inner bark of Asiatic bittersweet is great for spinning weaving, and knitting. These pins are made from Japanese arrow bamboo, and the brush fibers on brushes are from the inner bark of assorted vines, such as porcelain berry, bittersweet. Now, in my neighborhood, ivy is a perennial pest that shows up best in winter when I focus on cutting old stems from trees. A year after this treatment, the ivy dies and the trees are shed of their burden. This is very satisfying. If an old mature vine is large enough, I'll dry it out, mill it, and transform it into something ridiculous. Now with the immature vines, I'll drag them into the alley, strip off the leaves, take the stems in a pot and steam those stems for about half an hour, strip off the bark, and I'm left with this straw-like xylem. I can soak that and make fine basketry out of it, but most often I'll just shred it, cook it in an alkaline bath, wash it a few times, and put it in a Hollander, which beats it to a pulp. And the resulting paper is it's kind of a weak paper, but it takes to the letterpress very well. It absorbs ink well. It takes a good impression from the letterpress. So it's good for printmaking. So I've tried this similar approaches with a wide variety of invasive plant fibers, and they all differ in color, texture, absorbance, strength, and rattle, which is the sound a sheet makes when you shake it. This sheet in the front, the bright white one, is from white mulberry's inner bark. The second sheet in is from the epidermis and the hemicellulose on the outside of the stem. The next sort of creamy sheet is from the inner bark of Rose of Sharon. Now the ivy paper is in the back, the furthest one to the right. That's the cream colored paper. In front of that is Asiatic bittersweet, sort of a gray paper, very strong. In front of that is a golden paper made from the inner bark of Japanese honeysuckle. It's super soft and takes forever to make. Finally, the light green paper rattles with a real bright rattle. It comes from this plant, garlic mustard. Now in the winter, I'll pull these up, cut off the leaves, throw them in a frying pan with a little olive oil and garlic. It makes a great pot herb, great winter green. And that's why it was originally brought over here. Now in the spring, when it bolts, no longer good for eating, but these cruciferous flowers are a flag to me that it's time to go clear them out of the woods before it goes to seed. Years ago, the Croydon Creek Nature Center in Maryland sponsored a garlic mustard pull. So I had an opportunity to organize an event where volunteers could come in out of the cold and rain and strip leaves off some garlic mustard stems. These stems were dried in the sun for a few days, shredded, cooked in a sodium carbonate solution, washed, put in a Hollander, which turned it into a green pulp that was suspended in a vat, and using a mold and decal, formed it into sheets. Meanwhile, woody weed scraps from the studio were burned in a soot collector. This soot was brushed off onto a ground glass plate, and was molded with gum arabic and glycerin. The glycerin prevents the ink from drying too quickly on the printing block. So a relief printing block was slid under this 19th century cast iron hand press to make a print commemorating the event at the Nature Center. These prints were sold in the Nature Center, generating revenue for the center. So it's an example of how the inherent value of an unwanted material can help bankroll its own removal. The white mulberry on the left is the strongest, brightest, and lowest tech sheet. You don't need a Hollander beater to make this sheet. White mulberry was brought to Long Island in the early 1800s for the silk industry. The leaves were fed to silk moths. Now, the industry didn't take off, but the trees did, and now they're in just about every state. In the winter, I look for 1 to 2 year old stems, bundle them up, take them to the alley, cut them to length, put them in a steamer for about 30 minutes, strip off the outer bark, and then I scrape off the outer bark and the sort of greenish hemicellulose, which you see on the right there. On the left is the inner bast of white mulberry. So I throw that into a pot, often with ash lye generated from rainwater added to ash from burning white mulberry wood. It makes it alkaline enough to cook the mulberry. So once I bring it to a boil, I'll cover it with wool blankets and let it do a slow cook on its own overnight. By morning, the fibers pull apart very easily. So I'll wash that a few times and then beat it with bats for maybe half an hour. And then suspend the fibers in a vat of water. These fibers are about as fine as cat hairs. Then we use a mold and decal to draw the sheets. And these sheets are stacked and put under 20 tons of pressure from a hydraulic press to squish out most of the water. Then the sheets are transferred to an air dryer powered by a couple of cabinet fans. And by morning, you've got a good strong sheet of white mulberry, hand-beaten mulberry paper. Now, sometimes I'll blend fibers. This is a 5-weed note made of the fibers from upper left to lower right, white mulberry, garlic mustard, Asiatic bittersweet, ivy, and autumn clematis. But sometimes I restrict a piece to extracts from one plant only. This is a sort of a pinkish sheet from the bark of early spring multiflora rose stems. The black soot ink is derived from burning the leftover stems. A white mulberry block transferred white mulberry soot to a sheet of white mulberry paper to make this flag. Now this piece is made from bush honeysuckle. I noticed when cutting bush honeysuckle that the older limbs have sort of flutes in them, like a classical Greek column. So I thought I'd make a temple in honor of this plant. The paper is from the inner bark of the stems of bush honeysuckle. The black ink is soot from the burned stems. The wood is all from Lonicera mackii, and even the green paint I used to color it is from that plant. The design of this temple is based on the temples in China that stand in the native habitat of multiflora rose. So all this wood, pigment, and paper came from multiflora rose, growing just a few steps from my house. Multiflora rose is where I get my reddish pigments. During a workshop where we were cooking multiflora rose stems to make paper, I got distracted and let it boil down a little too far. And I noticed that the water was highly pigmented. So I rendered it further and came up with this sort of gummy substance that's perfect for letterpress printing. All I have to do is add a little lecithin to it so it won't dry too quickly on the block, and it's just a dreamy color. I'm always trying to expand my color palette. The blue at the top of the light color blue at the top of this Alien Weeds color wheel is from a nugget of anthocyanins in the root crown of garlic mustard that's only available in the spring. And I cut out this little nugget, put it in a mortar and pestle, make a blue ink, and I have to get it down on paper immediately. If I try to store it, it turns gray. It's pH sensitive. If it's in the presence of a base, it goes blue. If it's in the presence of, say, white vinegar, it turns pink. So it's a pH indicator. This vivid yellow comes from the inner bark of leatherleaf mahonia again. And that yellow pigment is berberine. It's an antimicrobial compound. If I were to turn the lights off and darken the room and then turn on a UV light, you'd see that this fluoresces. So I could make blacklight posters if I wanted to. An aqua pigment is derived from the inner bark of bush honeysuckle. Again, you can see the indentations from the flutes in the wood. Now, what happened here was I was cooking these for paper making, and I saw the tip of one of these slats of bark sticking up above the water surface. And I noticed that in the presence of steam, after it had been exposed to a base, it turned this beautiful aqua color. So I isolated that and now use that as an aqua ink for printmaking. I later found that this is chlorogenic acid, which is a harmless edible acid. This fall, I began experimenting with the blue petals of Asiatic dayflower. It's an invasive plant in DC, which was once used by Japanese printmakers as their go-to blue for skies. Now, the Japanese often kept their prints in portfolios, which preserved the colors. These pigments will last for years, provided that they're not exposed to bright light. If somebody does buy a brightly pigmented print from me, I advise them to frame it under ultraviolet resistant glass and display it in low light. I like to highlight people who work at removing invasive plants. This honors Joan Furlong, who once came up with a business in DC called Black Cat Ivy. If you had an ivy problem in your backyard, you could call Joan. She'd bring her crew in and clean it up for you. I like highlighting tools used in removing invasive plants. This is a weed wrench. And this image was converted into the logo for Steve Manning's business, Invasive Plant Control, headquartered out of Nashville. I'm always on the lookout for down weed trees, invasive trees. This white mulberry fell in a city park, and I was able to arrange for a tree service, cut it up and truck it to a sawmill. And after kiln drying, I had a studio filled with this wood for years. Lately, I've been experimenting with transforming various woods into musical instruments. These are simple percussive instruments called bones. The brightest, most musical clicks come from white mulberry. This is a resonating percussion instrument with interchangeable necks, each of which produces a different sound. Now, I'm not skilled enough to make flutes, so if I want a flute made, I hire a flute maker. So I sent some calorie pear to a California flute maker, and he made this pentatonic flute for me based on the Japanese shakuhachi. This is calorie pear, and it's a common roadside weed tree in the mid-Atlantic. So with the music that I've been making from these weeds, I've been wanting to integrate it with the visual art that I'm making through animation. This little piece is Weed Waltz. It's a print edition of 12, with each print slightly different because each is a frame in the animation. Let's turn on that video. Let's see. I'm going to turn on the video. Okay, let's try it now. That sounded a little gnarly and distorted to me, but stop the video. Those swaying grasses in the background were Phragmites. You may be familiar with it. It's an alien weed of the marshlands. For a group show about aquatic invasive species, I developed a print with paper from the stems of Phragmites. And for the film documenting that, I wanted a soundtrack that included music from an instrument that could produce chords. So I built a xylophone with a Norway maple frame and highly resonant white mulberry wood for the keys.
Hey, Patterson.
Okay, let me see how to stop share here.
I don't think I'm the only one who's feeling a little stunned right now. We had some questions for you, Patterson. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
One question is, you use the word wash. What do you mean by that?
Use the word what?
Part of your process, I think you used the word wash. Is there a specific, are you just, is that just intended to be rinsing with water?
Yes, I'll soak the water. I'll soak it in water to get the alkaline agent out of the fiber.
Right on. Another question is, Patterson, are these your own floral designs?
Yes, those are my drawings. Yeah.
Another question, looking at the image with the 6 pieces of paper, what were each made of?
The 6 sheets that were sort of overlapped. They were white mulberry, rose of Sharon, ivy, garlic mustard. What else was in there? Asiatic bittersweet, Japanese honeysuckle. I think I went through all of them.
Okay. And the last question I've got in question and answer is, can you give a quick overview of your typical process for getting color from using inner bark or branches?
When I'm prospecting for color, I often use ethanol. With Mahonia, I'll use just a potato peeler to get the rough outer bark off, and then I'll peel the fluorescent yellow inner bark into a jar and suspend that in a ethanol solution. It can be grain alcohol, or it can be just burning alcohol that you get for an alcohol stove. Then after a week, I'll give it about a week, I'll pour that into a white plate with a large surface volume and evaporate off the alcohol. And that leaves me with a sort of a sticky gum that I can either, in that case, rehydrate with water or with ethanol. I'll also use ivy leaves. I'll take ivy leaves and jam them down into a jar and then pour ethanol over that. And I get a pretty nice green out of that.
I can't answer a question through the Q&A, so you're going to get this one verbally. But I have a question about how you actually put together your the wood blocks themselves. So are you hand carving those, or is there another technique that you use for development of your wood blocks?
You know, I used to hand carve those, but they're not suitable for that. They're hard or grainy. They're just, it's very difficult and time consuming. So I use machines whenever I get a chance. It just lubricates the process. I use a laser engraver to cut those blocks now. So I can get really fine detail in just a fraction of the time that it used to take for me to carve the blocks by hand.
Thank you. So awesome.
Very impressive, Patterson. Really appreciate you sharing some of that with us.
Yeah, thanks again for inviting me.
Patterson's email is in the chat if anyone wants to connect with Patterson after this. Thank you for coming, and really enjoyed the presentation.
Okay, y'all take care.
Okay, so moving on to Weston Miller will present the Solve Pest Problems, the new pest management resource. And Weston Miller serves as the community and urban horticulturist for OSU Extension Service. Since 2007, he has managed the popular Master Gardener program in Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. Weston is a program manager for Solve Pest Problems for OSU and is working with OSU and stakeholders to plan and initiate the statewide outreach program. Weston serves as elected director and treasurer for West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District, and in his free time enjoys gardening and hiking with his family in Southwest Portland. Weston, if you're ready.
Sure, I am. Howdy, folks. Good to see you. Thanks, Aaron, for the introduction. Wow, that was amazing. I am humbled by Patterson's artwork. That was unexpected and just super cool. I just dropped a link into the chat, which is for the Solve Pest Problems website. That's the topic of my presentation today. I'm also going to show you some QR codes, and here's where I'm encouraging you to follow my lead and go check out the website as I'm making this presentation. So this is Solve Pest Problems, a new pest management information service for the Pacific Northwest. And again, my name is Weston Miller, and I work with OSU Extension Service. Here's a preview of the topics of the presentation. So just a little bit about the Solve Pest Problems project, a little bit about the IPM process. I'm going to show you some vignettes of the website. There will be screenshots similar to the one you see on the right-hand side of the screen, which is the home screen for Solve Pest Problems on the phone view. Talk a little bit about urban areas being ripe for invasive weeds, and I'll take you through a couple of the weeds on the Solve Pest Problems site. So again, I dropped the URL in chat, but it is solvepestproblems.oregonstate.edu. Here's where also, if you want to show your phone's camera up to the QR code on this screen, you would be able to bring up the home page of the site. And then on your left-hand side is a screenshot of the home screen. And I'll give folks a minute here to bring this up on your phones before I move on. So Solve Pest Problems is learn research-based and effective tactics for common garden and property pests and weeds. We provide non-chemical methods alongside the most effective and least toxic chemical options to reduce risk to people and the environment. Want to give a big shout out to our sponsors along the way. They've included Metro, East Multnomah, SWCD, City of Gresham, West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District, various departments at OSU, including OSU Pesticide Safety Program, Casey Buell. About 5 years ago or so, we got an ODA Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Grant, and also some funding from the Oregon Association of Clean Water Agencies. It really has been a group effort. Back in 2019, in working with my bosses at OSU to get this project going, all of these organizations shown on the screen wrote letters of support to OSU in support of the Solve Pest Problems project. I think what I'm most proud about is that we have both the pesticide lobby, meaning the Oregonians for Food and Shelter and the Farm Bureau, and the environmental lobby, meaning the Oregon Environmental Council, all agreeing that OSU is the right agency to take the lead on this. And that because we basically thread the needle down the center of providing research-based information and providing both chemical and non-chemical information side by side, folks have empowered us to take the lead on this project. The intended audience for Solve Pest Problems is not agency folks, but it's your clients, let's say. It's do-it-yourself urban and rural residents, public and private landscape and pest control professionals, retail and nursery workers, OSU volunteers, including master gardeners and master naturalists, master beekeepers. Really importantly, community is historically underserved by OSU's integrated pest management resources. And then what we found is really anyone in the Western US looking for reliable pest management information. Just a little bit about our process for the Solve Pest Problems website is that we hired website professional developers and user experience experts, graphic designers, and usability testers. We created templates and mock-ups, and then we did user testing, 4 rounds of user testing with regular old people. We used a recruiter to find them. We gave them a set of tasks to go through the website. They talked out loud as they were exploring. And myself and a usability expert basically recorded all that and then used it to improve the website, to make it navigable, to make it usable, to make sure that the language we were using was understandable by regular people. Again, the audience is the general public. And then all of the content has been reviewed by my colleagues in the OSU Department of Horticulture. So peer review is an important part of publishing any work through Oregon State University. One aspect of the project that I'm particularly proud of is that we did plain language editing for all of the content. Initially, we wrote a bunch of sort of draft pages, and it was in the grade like 10 to 12 or so reading level. And we showed it to a group of stakeholders, specifically Latino folks, and they said, this isn't good enough in terms of being accessible for regular old people. So I learned how to do plain language editing with a program called readable.io. This is a screenshot that shows just a little bit of text, and it's put into the editor, and the red shows longer sentences and the yellow sort of medium-sized sentences. But overall, on the right-hand side, there's a grade A, meaning really good, a reach, 100%, a reading level of 4.6, meaning a grade level of 4.6. And then the flesh read with ease score right about here, 80%, or excuse me, 80, and a good score is 60. So by doing plain language editing, we're making the website as available or accessible to regular old folks. And then, as the old saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And then I'm assuming that 6 pictures and a little bit of text is worth 6,000 words. So the same text you saw just before, this is the corresponding screenshot that shows photos of ivy and descriptions along with it. So in the Solve Pest Problems site, there are hundreds of pictures. It takes just as long to find good photos as it does to write content. But we've found that folks don't really read website information, they scan it. And by providing pictures and text alongside each other, it allows people to find the information they're looking for quickly. And then just a little bit about how to navigate the website. So these are screenshots of the homepage. You can see the main sections, and we'll go through that in a moment. At the top, there's a menu for it. So here's where, again, I'm going to direct you to the homepage. I'm going to drop, whoops. I'm going to drop the URL into the chat again at the top, so you have access to it. And then I am going to back out of my presentation and go to the website. Whoops, wrong one. Could someone please confirm that you can see this on the screen now? You can see the Solve Pest Problems website.
Looks great, Weston.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so this is the homepage, and as we go down into it, here are the main sections. So there's mice, rats, and wildlife, yellow jackets and wasps, ants, spiders, fleas, pantry pests, and more. The weeds includes vines, bushes, and trees. Really specifically, it was called out to us that the general public doesn't really understand the word shrub. They refer to roses and rhododendrons as bushes, for example. Lawn problems, moss on roofs and walkways, mold in homes, insects, slugs, diseases on plants, and invasive and aggressive species. So I want to just poke around a little bit here to show you the deal. For example, with yellow jackets and other insects. First off, we call out the yellow jackets. And then we go into spiders and biting insects. So each of these, let's call it a navigation card, each has an opportunity for people to dive in. It has the scientific name. And even before people see more information, we'll see that action is highly recommended for bed bugs, for example. So that's just one example of one of the main navigation pages for the insect type pests. Also want to point out that up at the top here, you can access that same menu here with the drop down, and you can see the same icons going along with it. And then general guides. It was made clear to us early on that folks are looking for information, how to handle weeds, how to handle plant problems without using herbicides or pesticides. So for example, control weeds without weed killer. This page has 50+ practical tips to control weeds, often described as natural, non-chemical, and non-mechanical. So that means basically 50 photos and 50 descriptions of techniques that people can use to control weeds without using herbicides. One of the sections of content that I'm most happy with is the pesticide information. Here's where I worked with OSU's Casey Buell. She's the pesticide safety education program coordinator. And she wrote this content and we made it together. The whole idea is that this is information for people to reduce the risks of pesticides to people in the environment. That's for the applicator, for kids and pests, keeping pesticides out of waterways, reducing the risk of pesticides to pollinators. Next, we have important information about transport and disposal of pesticides, including how to dispose of empty pesticide containers. And then down towards the bottom here, some great information from Casey about understanding pesticide labels to protect people in the environment. And I'll give you one example into the page here. So in terms of herbicide labels and non-target plants, we provide people with hopefully some key information to help them to diagnose herbicide damage. And also talk about herbicide damage from vapor during hot weather and the phenoxy herbicides, 2,4-D and triclopyr and similar ingredients. And then really clear example with a warning. Some weed killer herbicide products become a vapor on hot days and can injure nearby plants. People have been sued for damaging farms and vineyards and gardens. Ester forms of 2,4-D, triclopyr, and similar herbicides can vaporize on hot days. Check the label, temperature limits, don't spray when it's hot or when hot weather is expected within 1 to 2 days. So we're just trying to call out all this really important information that regular old folks and probably even trained applicators aren't necessarily going to be able to find and use on labels and so on. One more page here that I'm particularly happy with. Let's go to keep pesticides out of waterways. Here's where we worked with, we got a slide set from the Western IPM Center, their photos, and put it into our format here. And the whole idea is we want people to minimize the risk of pesticides and entering waterways. This is a sort of a menu that allows people to jump into the sections, understanding how pesticides get into waterways, pay attention to weather conditions, read the label and follow the instructions. As we go down into the page, there's also a top tip that says don't dump pesticides or rinse water into storm drains. This is illegal, and so on. And then for each of these sections, there are photos and there's just brief amounts of text to help people to understand. For example, don't mix herbicides or pesticides in the curb or on the street. That water can contaminate the storm drain system, and so on. Paying attention to weather conditions in terms of rain, inversion layers, wind, and hot weather. And then most importantly, reading the label and following the instructions, looking for information in the environmental hazards section of it, and look for information on the directions for use. So again, all this content was developed by Casey Buell and myself. And the idea is that we're trying to make pesticide information, which right now is super obscure, available for the general public to be able to use and to understand. I'm going to jump back to the presentation here. Just give me a moment. Sorry, my mouse has disappeared. Where is it? Okay, we've talked about the pesticide safety information. We've talked about the property management guides. Also, I'll just point out that there's a lot of information in there on lawn care. We have a section on broadleaf weeds and lawns with showcasing about 20 different weeds, grassy weeds in lawns, insect pests in lawns, plant diseases in lawns. So right now with OSU's information on IPM on these topics, there's separate Pacific Northwest Insect Management Handbook and separate Pacific Northwest Disease Management Handbook. Those resources are kind of hard to use and really intended for trained applicators. In essence, they're spray guides. So we tried to combine all that information, put it in one place so people could find it, look through pictures, and be able to sort through it on their own. I'm gonna show you the invasive species page in a moment here, with things like emerald ash borer, jumping worms, Japanese beetle. ODA and OSU have created a bunch of content that's already out there. So for those particular pages, instead of creating whole pages of content, we basically have placeholders with cards and photos where people can identify it, with links going to the relevant resources either at OSU or ODA, and reporting information through the Oregon Invasive Species Council. If you all are not familiar with the jumping worm, I would say this is something I'm particularly concerned about. With the jumping worm, it's a new pest to Oregon, and I handled a couple questions last year from the public where they notice these worms and they move around really dramatically, and then the worms really just voraciously plow through organic matter in the soil, changing the soil texture quite a bit. So if you're not already familiar with the jumping worm, I encourage you to check it out. Here's an important caveat regarding Solve Pest Problems, and that is this. So here in Oregon, we grow dozens, hundreds of different kinds of plants. Each plant, say, for example, roses, has many different insect problems and many different disease problems. The existing OSU resources, P&W Insect and Disease Management Handbooks, there's going to be like 25 insects and 25 diseases that roses encounter, kind of like in a nursery setting, though. We're going to really focus on the ones that affect regular old people growing their roses at home. So rose aphids, rose black spots. Also, at this point, we really just have placeholders for 4 plant problem type pages. We anticipate building out more pages in the future as funding and time become available. But for right now, we just weren't able to address that because we wanted to focus on a lot of the content where OSU had larger gaps in terms of information, and that includes invasive plants. So if you are interested in making a donation to our fundraising campaign for the plant problem section, you're welcome to do that. We've got a nonprofit, the Agriculture Research Foundation, that can accept donations. As you know, there are an increasing number of invasive weeds, and you can see my thoughts on on lesser celandine. I've seen it pretty problematic in Southwest Portland, where I live, and other parts of town. Urban areas are ripe for invasive plants because there's a lot of disturbed soil, the shiny geranium growing along the side of the road. There's a lot of neglected areas with the cherry laurel growing between 2 fences. And then there's a lot of spread of horticultural plants like yellow archangel. As a ornamental plant installed, it spreads really rapidly to new areas and also just a really thick mat. And then in urban areas, many property managers don't have the critical decision-making knowledge and weed management skills and training to handle the situation. So that's where Solve Pest Problems comes in, and we're really happy about the weed content we have. I'll show you a couple in a moment. I also want to just point out, like, in the general public, there's a lot of just misunderstanding about how to go about controlling weeds. For example, here's an example social media post. Morning Glory and Buttercup are invading my yard. I feel overwhelmed. Should I just pull up what I can and then cover the remainder with cardboard and wood chips? Then what to do? Help. So that's not going to work so well. Creeping Buttercup and Morning Glory are both perennials. If smothered with cardboard and wood chips, the roots are going to find their way through. They're eventually going to resprout. And then there's going to be a really robust root mass underground. So this is just sort of evidence of the misunderstanding of weed control among the public. And I've made this presentation a bunch of times to pesticide applicators in recent weeks. And I'm encouraging folks to up their game in terms of urban weed management as pesticide applicators, get into these directories so that they can advertise their service and really specifically call out how they use integrated pest management to solve the problem, but that including, like, how are they going to manage human health risks? How are they going to make sure it doesn't wash into the storm drain, and so on. So just to touch on IPM, the idea is that we identify weeds, learn its biology, determine the control options and weigh the benefits and risks, implement control actions for the situation, monitor and repeat as needed, and implement preventative measures. So let's take that into context with the weeds pages. Here's where I'm going to bring back the site. Wrong one. Oops, sorry. My bad. Okay, so on the weeds page, so first of all, there's a list of the ones we have available at this time. We have about 15 more that are already written and drafted, and we're building out now. We know that there are additional weeds down the line that will do. We called it out in terms of broadleaf weeds, grasses and grass-like weeds, vine-like weeds, trees, shrubs, and bushes. And then also an alternate way for people to think about it in terms of weeds in lawns, weeds in gardens, landscapes, and property, and weeds in or near water. Let's go ahead and check out some of the toughies here: blackberry, knotweed. So there's a tag indicating that they're invasive. There's an explanation, action highly recommended at the bottom. And we'll dive into Tree of Heaven. So, for example, this is the, let's call it a pest content type. Yellow jackets, mice, all use the same general template that we used. And in the page here, first of all, at the top, we have a risk card. The risk card is really trying to point out that it causes some allergies. It definitely damages buildings, foundations, pavement, sidewalks, dominates areas, annoyance, it spreads quickly with roots and seeds, and the environment. It's an invasive tree that replaces native vegetation and transforms areas. And in the photo here, you can see the Tree of Heaven next to a building, damaging the foundation. Next, we go into the ID section. So we're basically taking people through IPM without using that word necessarily. In the ID section, just looking at the tree, the leaves, the bark, the seeds, the extensive root system, a call out section for lookalikes. So for example, with Tree of Heaven, it's got the notches at the base of the leaves, compound or the leaflets on the compound leaves, whereas black walnut doesn't and sumac doesn't. And with black walnut, tolerating it if possible, and sumac, same thing. Also, we called out the spotted lanternfly as a species of concern associated with Tree of Heaven. And then also importantly, we've got a get help button so people can dive in and get help from OSU's Ask Extension. So if people put a question there, it would go to people like me who are around the state, OSU Extension agents who can answer the questions. We call out the risks. We calling out that taking action is key. It spreads quickly and is difficult to control. And then going through the solutions, early detection and rapid response, physically removing plants, not terribly practical. Herbicides work when they are used according to label instructions, and then monitoring and follow-up as key. There's a jump to menu where we show, does it work? Is it safe? Is it recommended? And then these would jump down into each of these sections. And then let's go ahead and jump on into the herbicides, for example, for Tree of Heaven. So triclopyr, glyphosate, and imazapyr are the active ingredients we'd encourage people to look for. Does it work? Several years of monitoring and effort. High effort. It's going to take a lot of time and effort. Moderate risk. Herbicides always come with risks, and then linking to how to keep pesticides out of waterways. And then going down into it more, a photo of the tree and specific of an herbicide with imazapyr in the active ingredient section, herbicide application tips as well. And then we go into herbicide application methods, calling out foliar, basal bark application, and the frill application method as all useful for Tree of Heaven in terms of depending on the size of the plant. Also, just we have, let's call it boilerplate information on all of the pages that talk about either herbicides or pesticides. This was all edited by Casey Buell, our pesticide safety expert. We're encouraging people to read labels, precaution, warning, danger statements, precautionary statements. We have some information about protecting yourself, protecting children and pets, protecting the kids that you want to keep in waterways, avoiding weather situations, information on disposal. And here's where Metro, as a partner for this project, we have information about Metro's Recycling Information Center. And then also calling out if people are going to be using herbicide or pesticides on school grounds, there are separate requirements there. These are links to the National Pesticide Information Center, partner at OSU. So people have further questions. There's information about preventing Tree of Heaven, including replanting with technical support. And then last point here is that we were able to get the data from IMAP Oregon, the Oregon Invasive Species Council, for each species. For example, Tree of Heaven, there's a state ID number. So we put that into a system and we're able to grab their data in real time. And as you all probably know, right, the ODA was encouraging people across the state to report Tree of Heaven in this last year. So here's convenient information about all of that. And then this is the data from IMAP Oregon live. And then if you click on this, it'll bring up a larger map as well. So for Tree of Heaven, the statement is, if you see it anywhere, tell us. For something like broom, where it's not like a statewide effort to find all of the populations of it, the statement is, if you see broom outside of the orange areas, report it. So in that way, we're really trying to help you all in the invasive species world, helping the general public just know more about where these things occur. And then lastly, we have information about our authors, including me and others, and then we have links to other information. So with all of that, oops, back to the presentation here. That's what I got for you, folks.
Austin, thank you.
Sure.
I have one question for you in the question and answer. And it is, some plants have particular smells. This could help the general public ID their pests if added to your platform. Comment, I guess.
Good point. Yeah, so I guess with Tree of Heaven, it smells a little bit peanut buttery, and that would be as opposed to walnut that smells like walnut. That's a great point. And I can see going back and addressing that where relevant. Yeah, and then I guess I'm seeing a couple comments in here. If you're in the process of redoing a website, I'd be happy to chat with you and share with you what I've learned in that process. This is like a 6-year, half-time job, and I've learned an awful lot about web development in that time frame.
One other question just came into the Q&A. Is there a section talking about disposal of pulled weeds, or a map that shows the closest place to dispose of them?
No map that shows the closest place, but for example, with ivy, we talk about it, you can put it in bags and take it to the landfill, or you could compost it in place by putting it on logs or other debris to keep it off of the ground. So let's say species by species, we call that out. Okay, folks. Well, like I said, if you want to chat with me, I see that my email has been put in the chat there. Happy to share experience of web development and all of that. And it's a good crowd here, 182 people. So thank you for listening, and take care.
Thank you, Weston, and job well done. It's nice to see that come to fruition. And we'll certainly contact you with any questions we have on our own website development. So thanks again. So moving into the partner highlights section. So here we will just take a quick tour around the CWMA and see what a few partner organizations are working on. Again, we'll be holding questions until the end of all the presentations, and then invite speakers to rejoin us to answer your questions. To kick us off, we'll have Michelle Delapine come back to discuss how the Portland garlic mustard partners have been managing and controlling garlic mustard in the greater Portland metro area with funding from Oregon State Weed Board. Michelle?
Thanks, Aaron. So I'm going to have a little help here with my slideshow. But yeah, one of the things we like to do at Pull Together is highlight partner projects. And this particular project has several CWMA partners involved. So we thought we would share a little bit about it. The Portland Garlic Mustard Project is the accumulation of 15 years of work by several partners in the Portland area. And I'm going to be kind of walking through the presentation by highlighting our project goals, looking at some trends, and sharing some photographs. And just a disclaimer, this isn't everyone that's working on garlic mustard in the Portland area. It's just those that banded together to get an Oregon State Weed Board grant. Next slide. Okay, so a quick intro. Garlic mustard is a biennial. It spreads exclusively from seed. It spends its first year as what looks like an innocuous basal rosette before springing up an elongated stem the second spring, and then flowering, setting seed, and these seeds mature by early summer. And here's the pictorial version of the life cycle. So upper left, we have the basal heart-shaped rosette leaves. And then you can see in the flowering stems, the leaves become more triangular with age. And then a close-up of the flowers. The flowers are always white and four-petaled and in cross-section. And then the flowers then become elongated seed pods, which at first are green, and these are immature seed pods. We still do management at this stage before the seeds fully ripen, the seed pods darken. And you can see on that far left photo the really good silhouette of that triangular leaf shape in the older plants. And then sometimes all life stages will be present, which makes this plant particularly challenging to manage, and often will grow in response to the weather. So if it's like a wet spring, it takes its time going into seed. But if it's a dry spring, it goes to seed much quicker. So it requires an adaptive approach. So I really want to underscore the importance of this slide. So garlic mustard is capable of invading a wide variety of habitats, most of which are in characterized Western Oregon. Garlic mustard often gets started in edge habitats or disturbed areas before moving into adjacent forest lands. And it thrives both in upland forests and riparian woodlands. In the upland forests, it generally spreads through deer movement, and then in the riparian woodlands through waterways. So what's at risk? So I mentioned that garlic mustard is capable of invading most of the habitats in Western Oregon. So we're worried. Garlic mustard bullies out other understory plants for resources, quickly forms monocultures devoid of diversity, and overall decreases the heterogeneity of the forest landscape. And there's even been some studies looking at invasive animals such as earthworms being spread along with garlic mustard. So back in the early 2000s, garlic mustard really spread like wildfire around roadside corridors, especially in the West Hills of Portland and in the Columbia Gorge. And these adjacent woodlands were then invaded as well. So now we're looking at what do we do next? And back in 2007, we banded together the original garlic mustard partners. You can go to the next slide. Banded together to apply for funding through the Oregon State Weed Board grant to control garlic mustard in streamside and road corridors, private properties, and parks. And the grant was originally managed by the Three Rivers Land Conservancy, but now is managed by us, West Multnomah. And it's leveraged 1-to-5 ratio of partner funding over the years. And these funds are used exclusively for control efforts on the ground and go to partners that wouldn't otherwise have funding. And the partnership has grown to include Eastside Parks and the city of Gresham. So now I'm going to be kind of going through for the rest of the presentation our goals for the project and kind of telling the story through our goals. So first off, we know prevention is key. And here we're not just talking about boot hygiene, but also like in a regional sense, keeping garlic mustard from areas outside the Portland metro area. And then also coordination is really big, both internally through the grant partners, but also throughout the area. So with partners elsewhere in the Portland metro area and across the state and even the region. Back in 2014, we co-founded with the King County Noxious Weed Control Board, the Pacific Northwest Garlic Mustard Working Group, which meets every other year and has had participants from as far away as Alaska, New York, and Alberta. So we do focus on clean boot hygiene. One of the concerns is that garlic mustard and popular hiking trails, such as in Forest Park, would be one possible vector where someone's hiking and they get their boots all muddy. Those muddy boots could then be used for a different hike, maybe in the Coast Range, where you might accidentally contaminate new areas with garlic mustard. So we have these informative signs in Forest Park. But really, we're also thinking preventatively across the region. So looking at trying to keep garlic mustard out of these areas in Western Oregon. And for the most part, these areas that are highlighted in Western Oregon are either historical sites or isolated sites. Really, the epicenter is the Portland metro area and the Columbia Gorge. We do also have a kind of similar story up in Washington, where Seattle and Vancouver are really the epicenters of the infestation. So a big part of the success of this program has been our outreach. And this program is really built on a foundation of strong private cooperation. Thousands of letters have been sent to private landowners requesting permission to enter their property to survey and control garlic mustard. And thanks to our outreach, we've received a really high number of response from these landowners. We also do weed watcher workshops. And next slide. Every spring, the city of Portland puts together a 4-page insert in the West Watersheds newsletter, and it reaches 10,000 people. And it's really these outreach methods that are responsible for people responding to our letters. They already are aware of garlic mustard, so they're more likely to get in touch with us if they do find it or respond to our mailings. So each spring we visit hundreds of properties and sites across the area. We map out infestations. We control the garlic mustard either with spot herbicide or hand pulling. And again, the grant funds exclusively this on the ground control work. And then at the end of the season, we take a look at our work and cross compare our notes with the other partners in the grant. And this work consists primarily of the West Hills of Portland, Forest Park, Southwest Portland, Johnson Creek watershed, and then starting in 2019, Ross Island and Oaks Bottom, and then more recently, the city of Gresham. And this next map is really detailed. I don't expect you to see all the detail, but I just want to highlight that each of these colored points represents a different agency working on garlic mustard. And we're working across private properties, parks, streamside corridors, and roadsides. So now looking at some of our data from over the years, starting in 2011, 2012, we had a huge outreach push, which did result in finding some new garlic mustard monocultures. But then pretty quickly through our control efforts, we were able to decrease the density of those sites, resulting in far fewer net acres of garlic mustard. That said, our challenge has been really to whittle down the footprint of those infestations. We can decrease the density, but it's been harder to kind of minimize the size of the overall initial footprint. And in looking at data in the Tualatin Basin, you can see the garlic mustard as a percentage of survey area has gone down drastically as well. And then if you look at it in terms of the overall abundance of garlic mustard, we have surveyed, Tualatin has surveyed increased number of acres over the years while finding less garlic mustard. So that's really an encouraging trend. And I mentioned earlier that garlic mustard is a really plastic, flexible plant. It grows much faster during hot springs and slower in wet springs. So we had to really modify our approach. Usually, like as the season progresses, we don't know until it's springtime what weather conditions are going to bring. And generally, this means hand pulling both in wet and hot years. In wet years, we don't have many spray days. And then in dry, hot years, we have a very small spray window. And in general, we've been moving to more and more doing hand pulling. And that's because instead of these large monocultures, that are more suitable for spray, we're having just isolated plants, which can be hand pulled easily. And then we do a lot of restoration, both passively and actively. So passively, that's just like removing the garlic mustard itself, but then we also do seeding. And then a lot of our sites, a lot of the property owners go on to complete either conservation plans or some other conservation work through like the backyard habitat program. And now I'm going to be walking you through some like before and after photos. So this first photo is from Ivy Creek up in the West Hills. This is a restoration site that had a monoculture back in 2012 and now has a diversity of fords thanks to annual treatment work. This next slide was a result of some active door-to-door outreach where we discovered this large infestation growing in the backyard. And I'm happy to report that the last couple of years, we haven't seen any garlic mustard there. So that's definitely a success story.
Hey, Michelle, you've got a couple of minutes.
Okay, almost done. And then in Tryon Creek, this is a site also resulting from our mailing outreach. And this is literally right on the border of the Tryon Creek State Park. You can see in the background, that's actually in the park. And then the foreground is the private property. And this site was managed exclusively through hand pulling and now also shows forbs such as waterleaf and miner's lettuce coming back. And last photo here is just another one from Tryon Creek that was also hand pulled exclusively and looking much, much better these days. So just want to end on really like a strong noting like how strong our infrastructure has been for this grant project over the years. Like we've built a really solid foundation. We work with hundreds and hundreds of landowners visiting properties across the area each spring. It's a really big undertaking, but thanks to this like strong foundation we have, it's becoming easier to get to all these sites and manage them for the holdouts that we still have. And a big piece of this has been coordination, and not just with ourselves, but with partners from across the area. And again, mentioning that, you know, it's not just us working on garlic mustard, it's several folks from across the CWMA and elsewhere in the region. We're all in it together. If you do find garlic mustard, please report to the Oregon Invasives Hotline.org. That's the central clearinghouse for all reports. And if you have any further questions, please reach out. And I guess we're holding questions till the end. So I think next is Mitch, who's going to talk about hogweed.
That is true. All right. That looks okay.
Looks good.
So this is a pretty uncomplicated talk just about what kind of work is being done on hogweed in the Portland area. It started sometime this fall when we were hearing about the work that the Clark Public Utilities folks had done. They had worked on several properties in the Salmon Creek drainage. And it occurred to me that I know the work that I'm doing. It's interesting to hear that they're doing the work, but I had not heard what other work was being done on hogweed in the general Portland metro area. So I put out a bunch of calls, and that's kind of what this talk has turned into. So in case you're not familiar with hogweed, there's a couple of pictures to help you with the ID. This is a a picture I've used many times over the last 10 years. I like it because it gives a good scale. It's probably a shorter plant. It's probably only 10 feet. I've seen a few that were taller. I also like that it includes that big leaf down low. It's a 4-foot wide leaf. That's really true. The picture on the right is a flower head that we cut off. And I like this one because it shows this big head in the middle, and then the smaller flower heads that quote orbit it, they're all coming off the same stem, which is unlike cow parsnip substantially. Those seed heads all tend to be about the same size, and they all tend to have their own stem. And then that caption I just left because I was intrigued by why that was thought to be useful. That was suggested to me by the software, and it's not wrong. It's just not very useful. So what I wanted to do was just go through the organizations that are doing hogweed treatment, more or less in order of the size of the infestation that they're working on. Clark Public Utilities, they worked on over 11,000 square feet of hogweed, 13 properties. I think they said it was a 4-mile reach in that creek that's in that map. And they did it all manually. This is the part that kind of blows my mind. They bagged out the seed heads and the root balls over the course of May and June of this past year. Kind of an amazing project. 11,000 square feet, that's about a 1/4 acre just of hogweed. I don't know everything that's happened here in the last 15 years, but my guess is that that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest hogweed management that's happened since ODA started working in, I think the Southwest project on Vermont Creek was probably comparable. They had hundreds of plants, but since then, nothing that size. So hats off to the CPU folks for that. The work that I'm doing is not nearly as, it's more diffuse, it's more distributed over the landscape, but nothing like 11,000 square feet. This is a map of all the sites that I've worked on. I think it's interesting to see the distribution. There's no pattern here. The blue dots are sites that have been managed, but just don't have any plants anymore. The ones that are in active management don't have that many plants. They mostly have fewer than 10 plants. And with the exception of one patch, none of them had any flowers. So I feel like we're keeping a pretty good lid on this one, on this species. The one new patch is the one that had well, it didn't have any flowers either. We got to it in time. This one was about 2,000 square feet, and it was way up in the West Hills, which made it an extra high priority because it's the main way these seeds spread around. They're super lightweight and papery, and they just get washed around. So dealing with it at the top of the drainage was pretty critical. So like I said, it's about 2,000 square feet. It was on a slope, kind of under a forest canopy. Fortunately, it was all in one big patch. It was doing what we expected it to do. It wasn't wandering off into other properties or off into strange places. And sometimes that happens. So we treated this in June before any of the flowers were able to emerge. So that's down the hill. This is a comparison across the top of the patch before and after. That's Jordan surveying the damage the week later. So pretty excited about this one. This was a case of correct identification. Almost all the reports that came in on new patches of hogweed end up being mostly poison hemlock, but sometimes cow parsnip. And only very rarely did they end up being actual hogweed. This was a landscaper that was working next door and said, that looks suspicious to me. We had a little flurry of emails and phone calls, and we're able to get in touch with the owner. We're able to get this done. So that's a good example of how the collaboration is supposed to work. Moving over to Washington County, they're doing a bunch of sites. You can see it in this site, that in this map. They're exclusively in the Fano River area, and that's because they're downstream from that big ODA patch that was that got worked on 15, 20 years ago in Southwest. So fortunately, it's all in one place, and their numbers are down. They're at about 400 square feet, and Tyler said they only had one plant that they found that was in flower. So that continues to be a success story. So that's exciting. And then there are very few other places that are working on hogweed, I'm happy to say. The East Multnomah Soil and Water folks did a bunch of work at a property next to an elementary school back in 2012. That was about 1,000 square feet, and they consider that to be an eradicated patch. They're working on one other place right now that they've been working on for 3 or 4 years. That sounds like it's not as big, and they've got that under control. Talking with folks at Metro, they're not working on any. With City of Gresham, they're not working on any. And West Multnomah Soil and Water, they don't seem to be working on any. So it's not just an artifact of we're not getting the word out. There just doesn't seem to be that much hogweed management going on. There aren't that many patches to manage. I did see that Cowlitz County lists hogweed as one of their target species, so I'm curious to know if that's a thing they're working on. But otherwise, I think the news is good news on hogweed. This is a species I think we're getting the upper hand on. That's what I've got for hogweed. And I'm gonna move us over to Jack. Jack Halsey's a naturalist and community organizer from Oregon's Willamette Valley. He grew up in Oregon and has been working with Watershed Council since 2013. Jack received his environmental analysis degree from Pitzer College with a focus on environmental science. He is currently the executive director for Oswego Lake Watershed Council and is also a board member and treasurer for the Institute for Applied Ecology. He specializes in planning and implementing riparian and upland enhancement projects, volunteer events, and field-based environmental education. He is passionate about environmental justice, fire ecology, and Oregon white oak ecosystems. Take it away, Jack.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, so today I'll be talking about weedy tree removal for fuel reduction and land resilience in Lake Oswego. And I wanted to define resilience briefly. So resilience is the idea of the ability of a system to respond to stress events. So that's one of the desired outcomes of this project, is to increase the resilience of the land we're working on. Starting off, I wanted to set a little bit of context for the vegetation composition of the Willamette Valley before settlement and colonization. So on this map here, you can sort of see this mosaic of different habitat types throughout the landscape. And this is the result of active management by indigenous communities for thousands or tens of thousands of years. And so that's a theme that I'll be touching on throughout the presentation, is the need for active management. A lot of our local ecosystems have evolved with active management, oftentimes fire as a main tool for management. And due to suppression of these traditional land management practices, some of the urban ecosystems that we're seeing today have some issues. So another theme I'll be touching on is forest succession. In a lot of the urban forest within Lake Oswego, forest succession processes have been reduced due to presence of invasive species. And so by removing some of these invasive species, we're creating more space for native plants to grow and thrive. And also we're looking at a long-term vision of what habitat types we might see in the future and what actions we can do now to facilitate the long-term health of urban forest areas. These photos here from the 2020 Clackamas fires, and I know for a lot of us, when we had those fires coming in close to home, it helped us realize that there is, a distinct risk of catastrophic wildfire in the Portland metro area, and in Lake Oswego specifically. On the left, this is actually one of our Lake Oswego Fire Department firefighters, Greg. And so our local fire department was actually engaged in these Clackamas County fires. And in Lake Oswego and the West Hills, a lot of the vegetation that we're seeing, as well as slopes and with climate change, we can anticipate that this threat of fire, catastrophic fire, is increasing over time. So within this project, one of our goals is to be proactive about fuel reduction and looking at what we can do now before catastrophic fire comes into our communities. What can we do to prepare for that threat? And in addition to improving the health of the land for other reasons. So this map up here was from 2017. A lot of Clackamas County communities identified potential areas at risk for wildfire. And this is the Lake Oswego area. And up to the north, you can see that the Mountain Park neighborhood was identified as a community at risk. And so this sort of is the context for this project that came together in early 2022. Through the legislature, funding became available through Oregon Department of Forestry for projects with a focus on fuel reduction. And in this case, the funding source was the Small Forest Land Grant Program, which is a new funding source. And these funds were available for work on land of private forest land owners. And Mountain Park Homeowners Association actually qualified as a small forest land owner due to the common property throughout the neighborhood. And so we had been working with Mountain Park HOAs for almost 10 years, mostly doing small grant projects funded by Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board and supporting them in community Ivy polls. But we had this existing partnership with the Homeowners Association. So when this funding opportunity came up on somewhat short notice, we started talking with Mountain Park HOA, with the Homeowners Association about putting together a project. Clackamas SWCD was also, and Justin specifically, were really helpful partners in developing this project. We had a lot of good existing plans and data on what forest management was desired within the HOA common property. And so that sort of laid the groundwork for putting together a grant application. So in early 2022, we submitted a grant application to ODF, which was funded. And so we started the project in March of 2022. So the project came together pretty quickly, but because of some of these established partnerships, we were prepared to actually put together a project on short notice. And then we also brought in the Lake Oswego Fire Department as a key partner, and they've been really helpful in a lot of the public outreach work that we've done as part of this project. So the project has definitely been very collaborative in nature. There are other partners too, such as the City of Lake Oswego and Lake Oswego School District that have supported different components of the project. So the rest of the presentation here will mostly be photos, and I'll basically be kind of telling the story of how this project has gone so far. It started in 2020 and it will be finishing this summer. So it is the active fuel reduction phase of this project is only about a year to a year and a half. But what you're seeing on screen here, this is pretty typical of what common property in Mountain Park Homeowners Association looks like. They're areas of pretty weedy, dense, invasive vegetation. And in this photo, there are some non-native shrubs. There's also invasive clematis and tree ivy. And this is all this kind of unmanaged vegetation is right next to residential property. This neighborhood also has a large number of apartments and condos. So there's mixed use housing. There's an assisted living facility in the neighborhood, as well as schools and churches. So there are potentially vulnerable populations in this neighborhood as well. So looking at this from a fire perspective, if we had, fire on the landscape, this invasive vegetation can act as a ladder fuel where a ground fire has opportunity to move up into the canopy of trees. So this is, when we look at this, there's management that needs to be done to reduce that risk. And then there's also the ecological component of these invasive vines on the trees are harming tree health. So without intervention, those trees are susceptible to different threats. Some other examples of some of the fuel loads that are primarily driven by invasive species. So on the left side here, there's English hawthorn that's been damaged from an ice storm. And so again, this is another example of potential ladder fuel where fire could move through a system. And on the right side, you have about a 20 or 25 foot tall holly. One of the threats with holly is when heated, holly leaves can secrete a flammable oil. And so holly can actually kind of burst into flame in a fire environment. So holly, hawthorn, some of the laurels and sweet cherry are kind of the main invasives in the system. And so in addition to these tree ivy infested areas that present a ladder fuel risk. So this summer, we had a youth crew that we funded through this grant, and we had 5 local youth and a crew leader who spent several months this summer doing summer activities. A lot of the work that they did was actually cutting tree ivy, basically cutting from ground level to about 6 feet high and peeling off that ivy to create a fuel break, but also to support that, to remove the threat of that ivy for the tree canopy. So this was a workforce development opportunity, and students were able to also participate in different sort of green jobs training, everything from community science activities like turtle surveying to doing water quality samples, as well as the hands-on work of removing tree ivy. We've also been getting support from volunteers in the community. So here's one of our local volunteers removing tree ivy from a maple. To set some context here, on the far left is I-5, and you can also see the county line dashed sort of horizontally between Multnomah and Clackamas County. And so within this area, we've been working on about 100 acres total of common property, and that's represented by these colored checkered areas. And a lot of this common property is in between residential areas. So this is basically a local example of a wildland urban interface where there's forested tracts surrounded by residential property. The red dots on the map, these are invasive trees, so over 6-inch diameter. And one one component of this project has been mapping the invasive trees, because in the city of Lake Oswego, to remove an invasive tree, you need a permit. And so we've mapped over 500 invasive trees so far, and have been pulling those permits before removing the trees. So with this project, we worked with a student from PCC Sylvania to help us develop an app within Field Maps to do all the on-ground survey work and to track our progress as we go. So having a good mapping program set up at the beginning of the project has been key to the success. We've also had a good amount of public outreach, posting signage, passing out flyers to residents and door hangers. We've hosted about 5 or 6 public forums with the Homeowners Association, and presented at a variety of other events, virtual and in person. So all the residents in the area are aware of the project, and we've been able to intercept issues before they become a problem by doing this proactive outreach.
So you got a couple minutes left, Jack.
Great, thanks. So this winter in November, we started the main phase of our project. We wanted to do the most disturbance-prone work in the winter outside of bird nesting season. So here we have staff from the Mountain Park Homeowners Association Landscape Department, as well as Oregon Department of Forestry crews doing manual selective removal of invasive species. And these are actually, a lot of the crew are seasonal firefighters. And so with this winter project, we've actually been able to support ODF in hiring on their fire crews year round, so that they don't need to find other seasonal employment in the wet season. Here we have some piles of invasive debris that's been staged, and our crews basically come in and pull these piles and put them through a wood chipper. And by creating wood chips with a lot of this material, we're also keeping the nutrients from those plants on site, providing improved soil cover, also supporting fungal communities. There's a salamander here on the left from an area that was wood chipped the prior winter. And so here's a before and after, where you can get a sense for what an area looks like once you've removed the holly and the hawthorn on the left side. And now on the right, there's an area along the stream that's ready for replanting and reseeding this winter and spring. And
Oh, I think we might have lost Jack there. Looks like you're back, Jack.
sorry, it looks like I cut out right at the end. Just to wrap up, wanted to, I lost my slideshow here, but we basically are putting together a management plan with a 1-year phase, a 5-year phase, and a 50-year phase to ensure that there is adequate replanting, maintenance of these areas, that areas that are cleared this winter don't have things like garlic mustard and herb robber and shiny geranium coming in once we've cleared space. So that management plan will help ensure that we have long-term investment in this project, and that the landscape will be more resilient, and that we can promote healthy forest succession over the next period of time. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Jack. I'm gonna go ahead and include the link to the Watershed Council in the chat, as well as your email address. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and invite Mitch and Michelle to come on back, and we can go ahead and ask a few questions of folks. So looking at our Q&A, the first couple questions are for Mitch and Michelle. So Michelle, how do invasive weeds spread with garlic mustard?
That's a good question. I don't know personally, but that is some research that's been done out on the East Coast, where they've been able to correlate garlic mustard with invasive earthworm spread.
Very cool. Yeah, and we can take a look and see if we can find that study and include it in the slide or in the page for pull together if folks want to take a closer look at that in the future. Another question from Michelle. Where on the coast was garlic mustard found?
Yeah, great question. So Clatsop County, there's an isolated patch that is being managed by ODA. And then Tillamook County, I did some digging and it doesn't look like it looks like it was like a false report. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We're definitely worried about garlic mustard getting into the Coast Range. So yeah, as far as we know, that's it for coastal reports.
Great, awesome. So the next question is for Mitch. So Mitch, what do you treat hogweed with?
Before I get into that, I need to mention that our code word for the second half of the morning is in fact hogweed. I've not been as timely on this as I should.
Good.
It seemed like an opportune moment to mention it anyway. We were not hand pulling that patch. We were using Garlon 3A, 2% rate, and that's worked pretty well. I don't generally do a lot of spraying on hogweed if I can get away with it. It's a couple of plants here or there are not such a big deal, but a thing on that scale was, and on a slope was going to be pretty challenging. And I'll address Cammie's question, which is what's the hypothesis on how that patch in the West Hills got there? My best guess is that there was something that washed in. There's a legacy hogweed site around the corner that we hadn't. It was showing no plants by the time I started this work in 2008 or 9. And so we didn't really look much further than that. And if we had, we wouldn't have seen a plant or two anyway. My guess is that it's just washed down the hill into this backyard and then just kind of dropped out of sight for a while. And the neighbor who had hired the contractor that got in touch with us had hired a previous landscaper who had told them that it was poison hemlock and you don't need to worry about it. So that added a couple of years to how long the patch was able to grow.
There you go. Also just want to point it out in the chat that Maria included the link to that survey about garlic mustard and earthworm. So if folks are interested in researching that, that is available in the chat for everyone to take a look at.
Perfect, thanks.
All right, so we finished up with that. The next question is for Jack. So for the Oswego Watershed Forest Management Plan, how important is past land cover or treatment history in identifying future planting or treatment practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of weed treatment history, we're working with Clackamas Weedwise. We have pretty good documentation of known priority weeds in the area. And so we're coordinating directly on that because there are some established garlic mustard patches in the area. In certain areas, we don't have a good sense for what other herbicide work may have been done in the past. There are some areas where there's been maybe encroachment from neighbors and that sort of thing. So there are some gaps. In terms of historic land cover, a lot of this area had mixed Oregon white oak systems, woodland or oak woodland, oak savanna, oak prairie, as well as Doug fir and big leaf maple and western red cedar. So we don't necessarily have data to a fine scale on what habitat type was in each area of the project, but we do know what is growing well in the area currently. And so within our planting palettes, we're not planting any more Doug fir. There's Doug fir and big leaf maple are already pretty abundant in the area. But in any dry, sunny, well-draining area, we're planting Oregon white oak and associated species. And we have, we're using the Oak Quest data to try to improve oak connectivity throughout the neighborhood as well.
Awesome, super cool. Another question for you, Jack, as my lights go down. How are you field mapping property boundaries between private and public lands to avoid accidentally working on private property?
Yeah, so great question. This whole project actually is all on private property. So Mountain Park HOA's common property is privately owned by the HOA, but between HOA property and residential property, the majority of the project area, we do have the property boundaries marked already. The HOA had done that several years back. So in most cases, we have pretty well marked property lines or at least fence lines. And if in doubt, we're leaving a buffer. There are some areas where we're working in maybe only a 10-foot wide strip of land. So in those cases, we have to be pretty careful. But yeah, if in doubt, we're not making sure not to encroach.
Awesome, very good. Well, that is all of the questions that we have today. So thank you all for highlighting your projects, and I'm going to hand it back over to Aaron.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Jack, Michelle, and Mitch also for the project updates. And we're getting towards the end here, so I'm going to invite John Wagner to join us. John is a senior rural conservationist at East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. And annually, he presents us with his cartoonist view of the event and how it went. And we shared some cartoons that he made for us during the event today. So, John, are you with us?
I'm here.
All right, look at that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is always really fun and great presentations today. And as I say every year, the comic notes they're just for fun. So see what happens. Yeah, so the pull together today, welcome Courtney to win. Data collection template was really cool. Good job, Lucas, on that video. I tried to capture your beautiful hair in the guinea pig as the template guinea pig. The most important thing I learned today was that Mitch has a degree in medieval history. I mean, not necessarily the most important thing I learned, but it's up there. Emerald ash borer in Oregon, sad as always. It's really small. That whole thing about it being able to affect true olives hopefully isn't too big a deal. Cool information. Don't move that firewood. Yeah, all the cool stuff about the serpentine galleries, D-shaped exit holes. I didn't know anything about trapping trees, the girdling. Hopefully that kind of thing is effective. Woodpeckers, best predators. Love the woodpeckers. Cool plants that Mitch talked about. Turkish thistle, woolgrass, colt's foot, among others. Of course, the Patterson-Clark presentation was amazing. I couldn't keep up with what he was doing. He just was blowing my mind. Ivy to paper and all kinds of different plants to paper. Learned about the Hollander beater for making paper, didn't know about those. Honeysuckle temple, making different colors out of the different weeds. The Phragmites paper boat video was amazing and beautiful. And of course, like the wooden slinky headdress thing that he had on at the end. I don't know what that was, but it was amazing and super cool. And let's see, wait, am I still turning? Oh, wait, I gotta do this. Where did my, this? Oh, here, I'll get you. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Final one. And then Solve Pest Problems. Super cool looking platform there. I tried to include as many gnomes as I could because I know Sam likes gnomes. The jumping worms, I've seen so much about them. Pretty scary stuff. And also, I didn't know that the general public didn't use the word shrub. They like to use the word bush. And yeah, garlic mustard. Always keep that hygiene on those boots. Be a real bully. I've drawn so many cartoons of garlic mustard anymore but I've never drawn two gnomes pulling a garlic mustard. So I wanted to do that. And the hogweed, always scary, and the holly can burst into flames. And that's it for me.
Excellent work as always, John. So always a pleasure to see these towards the end of the event. And that wraps up our agenda for today. It was really a pleasure to have so many wonderful presentations, and I want to thank all the presenters and all the members of the CWMA Planning Committee that helped pull this event together. Hopefully next year we can all be back together in person and enjoy some networking time and some time together, which is just as important as these great presentations. So thanks to everyone. Just a reminder about credits. So you should see another quiz come up on your screen. Please fill out that quiz. And remember, we can't provide applicator credits unless you completely fill out the quiz. We'll also have a survey, so there'll be another pop-up box when we close out the Zoom box for this meeting with a survey about the event. And just please take a moment to fill that out. It really helps us plan for future events. We do use the feedback, and it helps us to tailor the experience to what people want. So great to see so many people on this call today. Hopefully we'll see many of you at the next round of general meetings, which will be in March. And then again, looking for folks out in the field at the field day in the summertime. So it's my pleasure to do this today. So thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your afternoon.